Good evening. This is Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 meeting of the Town of Berlin Planning Board. As a preliminary matter, please note this meeting is being recorded and that some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that anything you broadcast will be captured and recorded. Confirm members access. This is Tom Sanford, Chair of the Planning Board. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me prior to me calling the meeting to order. Planning Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jay Teach. Here. Carolyn McDonald.
Here.
Timothy Wheeler.
Here.
Tom Sanford here. Anticipated speakers in the agenda, we will get to you when your time is at hand. With a quorum of the board present, I will call this meeting to order at 7:42 p.m. Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. This is an open meeting of the planning board being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. Specific information and general guidelines for the remote participation by members of the public can be found on the Town of Berlin website. The governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting laws to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location and encourages us to participate remotely. For this meeting, the planning board is convening using the Zoom platform as posted on the agenda, which includes links to the public to join this meeting. Ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After their concluding remarks, I will invite each board member by name to provide any comments, questions, penetrating insights, and/or motions. Please hold all your insights until your name is called. Board members and speakers on the agenda, please remember to mute your telephone or computer when you're not speaking. Speak clearly to ensure accurate minutes of the meeting are recorded. For any response, please wait until you're yielded the floor and state your name before speaking. If a board member wishes to engage in conversation with another board member, please do so through me to avoid multiple conversations at the same time. Lastly, please note that each vote in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Thank you all for your understanding and cooperation. And now on with the show.
I apologize in advance for not going through you when I want to talk to somebody else, but you know, it's not going to happen.
We've done a fair job of
yeah,
policing ourselves, but it's in the script. It's got to be read, unfortunately. So that's the way it is. So the first item on the agenda was mail and stuff like that, and we have a traditional cast of stuff from other towns abutting us, and they're interesting, but I'm not going to go through each one of them. We ever usually did when we were meeting in person. The only thing of interest is we did get a copy of a letter from a lawyer about a piece of property on Ball Hill and how the abutter is going to oppose a pole barn as a violation of the restrictive covenant. And it's been, I guess, amongst other people, not only us, but the building inspector, and I'm sure you guys got a copy of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've been involved from the beginning.
Yeah, okay. So it's just of note. It's the only thing that's not a bill or a notice of a public hearing from another town. So
what does the letter say?
It's basically all of the correspondence. So this one happens to be from Gambone, Joseph Gambone. Am I pronouncing that right? And
I think so.
It's addressed to, it's actually from Doucette Associates, addressed to Joseph Gambone at 59.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this came from Stephen Doucette.
Right. Yes. Mr. Gambone is the person who wants to build the pole barn.
Correct.
Yep.
So I don't know, can you give us a little synopsis? I mean, you guys, the other two seem to be,
Oh, sure, yeah, so it's off of Ball Hill, I think it's at least 3 houses off a shared driveway. Skip Duggan is one of the residents up in the little neighborhood. And when the project was approved by conservation, there was a protective covenant that was put on each of the deeds, basically limiting the amount of impervious area, the size and number of outbuildings, and I think that's it as far as what this man now wants to do. He wants to build like a 3-bay, 2-story pole barn, which square footage wise comes out to like 3 or 4 times or 6 times the amount of allowed outbuilding area. There's also a limit on the number of garage bays that can be on each of the properties. And so when Skip first found out what was going on, he got in touch with the guy, and the guy didn't seem to be willing to honor the protective covenant. Unfortunately, it's a protective covenant, so the town has no right to enforce that, which I found very upsetting.
really?
Yep.
Why can't we enforce a covenant?
According to everything that I've heard and been told, the neighbors have to ensure that the other neighbors do what they're supposed to do.
So this covenant, was that a conservation restriction?
Well, but a conservation restriction is a different document
Okay,
than a protective covenant. So it's not a conservation restriction.
got it.
Because the CR can't limit stuff like number of garage bays, and that it can restrict what happens on the land that is conserved, but a conservation restriction can't dictate what happens off of land that isn't conserved.
Okay,
So it's a protective covenant that the developer, as a way to make sure that the building envelopes, that the building area of each of the lots would stay, because it abuts Rack Meadow.
So
And
when
that's
this-
all conservation land.
okay, so when the property was subdivided, that's when the covenant was floated around, right? As I would imagine, a bargaining chip for putting in a shared driveway?
I don't know if it happened with you guys. I know,
No.
I believe it happened with conservation. I wasn't on the commission at the
This is
time.
before me, I don't remember Ball Hill shared driveway.
Well,
So-
you got to remember that all that land was part of that Sudbury Valley trustees package.
Tri-town.
It was 130 acres.
But
there
the
was a
houses were
developer
built
that was
before
gonna-
that.
Pardon?
I know Skip's house was built before that.
No,
No?
no. So what happened was there was a proposal to build a series of houses, quite a number. But the town exercised its right to purchase using Sudbury Valley trustees. And we came up with a solution that sold some of the land to Chuck Black, so he built
Yes.
the smaller number of housing units. And Fernstein bought several lots and protected those eventually, but had those as buildable lots for a while. And then Sudbury Valley trustees held some of the land that was in Boylston, independent of what came to the town. And then we so there was protected land that the town had, land that got sold, that got developed into the 10 units. But I think as part of that, there were probably, Sudbury Valley may very well have said, you know, we want some protection that assures the fact that there's not going to be a significant amount of greater development later to protect and, you know, enhance the environmental nature of Rack Meadow and all that stuff. So,
Right.
But the planning board was out of that picture. We didn't participate in that.
Right. I know at least Skip, and I think one of the other neighbors also put a bunch of their backland in conservation restrictions.
Yeah. And some of that's been added to ARC, I think. Some of their land, maybe.
Has been added to what?
ARC.
Agriculture, recreation, conservation. No, I guess not yet, but we had talked about it.
Right.
Because you're right, they put some further restrictions on the land that they held independently from the land that we protected with Sudbury Valley.
Yep.
I find that interesting that you guys don't, no one in the town has teeth on the covenant.
That's, yeah, that's what I've been told. You know, Skip asked the Conservation Commission to write a letter supporting, you know, kind of explaining how all of this came about at the time. And town council has advised us against that. So. So that's where that stands.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we've
no,
had stuff floated before us as a board, you know, between Sudbury Valley and some other landowners and things like that. And, you know, I know we've used that vehicle in the past to regulate, you know, what can and can't be done with some of the backland. And it's just,
right.
so the only way we could put teeth behind that is to make it a restriction.
Make it an actual CR. Yep. Yep.
But then people are less inclined to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's I think they're in for a long slog on that one too.
All right, well, we've kind of blown by our other agenda item that I wanted, that actually Jay had asked me to put on about some goal setting for the planning board, which I think is a wonderful idea. And I just, for the 15 minutes that I was allotted to it, I just wanted to know what other people felt about it and whether it was something that we would want to throw some goals out for this coming year, and then, you know, we can discuss how we go about doing that and making sure we adhere to.
I discussed it. Can I present the idea for 1 minute?
Sure, absolutely. Please do. I didn't.
Don't
mean to
forget, we
steal
got to
your thunder.
approve. Don't forget, we have to approve the minutes too, by the way. I was doing the annual report again this year, and boy, time flies.
It's crazy.
I was thinking maybe we could have 3 categories of goals for the year to make it a little easier to come up with them. And one could be finish things that we've already started. The second could be start things that we've already decided to do. And the third category could be decide on new things to do in the future. So I'm wondering if maybe that's all we need to say tonight. Maybe you guys can think about that. And when we get some time in a future meeting, we can try to populate those 3 categories with 1 or 2 or 3 things that we might get accomplished during the year, or at least get going during the year.
Yeah, sounds good.
Can we, can I make a suggestion too, that items that may not want to be tackled now get into a parking lot, and we have a revolving parking lot that we can pull stuff out of as things go further?
Yep.
That way we're not overwhelmed with something. If we want to, if it's important to us, we can stick it in the parking lot if we're not ready to deal with it at that particular juncture.
Yep.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, kind of keep us on task because things drift away. As you say, 1 year happens so quick.
Yeah,
And we can go back to any of the economic development plan, the housing production plan, the open space plan, and look in those lists for items that were identified as responsibilities of the planning board. And we could, we start with those and say, this one doesn't make any sense anymore. This one should be added to the high priority. This one we'll put in the parking lot, but there's
that's a good idea.
another source for projects, certainly, because those were identified. And in some cases, we've accomplished a number of them. We ought to go back and review those anyway and just make sure, if there are some that
Okay.
we've checked off, we can say good.
And I think that we can probably, what I would like to do is once we establish those, put them on the agenda so that they're near and dear, so we can, keep them rolling forward so that they're always on the top of our minds.
I do that for conservation. There's a couple of things under old business that just kind of stays there so we don't forget about it,
Right.
but we don't necessarily have updates or anything.
Yeah. Good.
I think
like
it's a good
that.
idea.
Okay.
All right,
I'd
so
be
the
happy to
task
move
is
it.
before next meeting, each one of us will have something that we will want to throw on there, right?
Yep.
That'd be great.
I'll be happy to move the minutes from the last meeting.
I'd be happy to second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the meeting of the minutes from January
25th.
5th. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any questions? Seeing none. I'll ask you to vote to accept the minutes of the meeting. Carolyn McDonald,
Aye.
Timothy Wheeler,
Aye.
Jay Teach,
I,
and Tom Sanford, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we got a couple of minutes before our first person on the agenda. And so it had been confirmed that they're going to ask to be on the agenda for next time, Tim, for the.
That's what I understood from, I got an email from Brian yesterday asking, and I responded that, that I would bring that to the board
Okay,
but I thought that I might ask to relay my conversation with town council, just so I don't lose touch with what we actually talked about. So
okay.
I'd
But
like
I
that
would, can we
opportunity.
hold that for a couple more minutes just in case? I just don't
Yeah.
want to jump the gun and then have somebody upset that it wasn't
No.
an agenda item, you jumped the gun and blah, blah, blah. So, and then I sent around, for after that, I sent around some correspondence. I don't know how many people got it the first time, but I sent around it again. We got a letter from Suzanne Roberts asking us to consider some of the items that ZBA is looking to, and so we'll talk about that afterwards. But I sent it around for everybody that didn't get a chance for it the first time. And then I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything else that I had in between. Hey, we have 1 minute. I have a quick question. Do bears always hibernate in the winter?
So it's kind of a misnomer that they go into a hole in November and don't come out till March. They do go into, they do hibernate, which
Sleeping
is
state?
exactly their systems slow down, which is different than torpor, which is a very different metabolic state. But bears do wake up, they do come out, especially if the weather is a little bit warmer.
Well, I have a sleepwalking bear.
That's awesome. Yeah,
No,
well,
it's
it's
not
been
awesome.
Wait, is it just the past couple of days? Because it was really cold before,
Right.
over the weekend. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first feeder got taken and torn apart. And the
Mhm.
second replacement feeder has gotten taken and torn apart.
Wow.
Stop feeding the birds.
Everybody's got to eat, right? You know?
Yeah. That's what the bear's saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this, I had the thing pretty damn high. He didn't take it. He took it off of the stand. He didn't knock the stand over.
Really?
Mhm.
So he's tall.
It's
So-
probably the one that we have running around, the female. She's got
Right.
paws on her like this big.
Wow.
Yeah. She's got to be 300 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a good
Ugh.
girl.
Want to see her.
I can probably send a picture of it. Our neighbor takes pictures of her all the time.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, her claws
Yeah.
are like that long. It's just,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
So,
All right,
Alright,
8:02.
so is there anybody in the audience that would be, so I'm looking for Greg, and Greg's
Yeah.
lawyer. Is Greg in the
Brian.
audience?
So
Brian's
someone,
hand is raised.
right, do we know who Brian Falk is?
He's counsel for Greg.
Okay, so I'm gonna
I've
promote him.
corresponded with him.
Do you want me to promote him or just allow him to talk?
We'll promote him, please.
And Greg is here as well.
Okay.
I'll promote him as well. If my computer decides to cooperate. There we go. There we go.
Can you guys hear us?
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How are you this evening?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. So we had you on the agenda, and I guess there was some correspondence to ask for, to be pushed till the next meeting. So giving you an opportunity to explain what's going on, because I really don't know what's going on.
Sure, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Brian Falk from Myrick O'Connell. I'm representing Greg and Allison Tremeling, and also Anita Maggot and Colleen Devish, two of the three owners along this common drive. We had asked for a continuance mainly because I just got on board and trying to get up to speed on the issues, and I wanted to have an opportunity to speak with town council if possible. I was able to do that this afternoon, so we're happy to proceed tonight with the discussion if you like. There's some few more bits of homework I'd like to do, but that shouldn't stop things tonight.
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem proceeding. You were on the agenda and it was published, so I guess I don't have an issue with that. We had, the last time we had a suggestion that we reach out and talk to town council on the question number one, and I know that Mr. Wheeler has had correspondence, and so if you would, I would like to start with Mr. Wheeler giving us a summary of the conversation, and then we can take it from there. How's that? Is that okay with you, Tim?
Sure. Yeah, so I got in touch with Amy and asked her the general questions that I wanted to get resolved, which were in the case of a common driveway where the town has added that new language back in June of 21, would modifications to a common driveway going forward after that date be relevant when the planning board would be requiring someone to come in and discuss those potential changes before they made them? And she agreed that that was, in her sense, the opportunity for the planning board ought to be made available. And then I said, so in the case of a common driveway that existed prior to that change in the language, would we expect that driveway to come under that new regulation? And she said, yes. So that driveway as it exists is grandfathered, but the changes that would be made to that driveway after June of 21 ought to have the planning board chime in on. So then I said, well, okay, we're looking at a common driveway in this case that existed prior to 21. So she said, okay, then it's protected. And then I said, if they make a modification to that driveway prior to 21 from the original approval, that would be grandfathered as well. And she said yes. And then we spoke specifically about speed bumps, and she felt that if you had a speed bump that had been installed prior to June of 21, it was protected. If the speed bump was taken up and it was a period less than 2 years, it could be put down again. And that if it was taken up and discontinued for more than 2 years, then you'd have to come back to the planning board and ask for approval. So I asked Greg to supply us with a letter that said when the decision was made, and I guess that was in December of 18. So that precedes the date that we made the modification to the common driveway bylaw. And the driveway's been in existence since, I guess, the late 90s. So it was approved by the planning board and met the specifications we had at the time. The only thing I asked Greg for that we haven't gotten yet, and we can talk about that now, but I thought it might be good to memorialize the state of the driveway prior to 21, essentially, when we made that modification, so that we know where the speed bumps are and their orientation and stuff like that, just so we memorialize that for the future. But that's in essence, I think, what I learned from Amy during my conversation.
If I can just, so Tim, you are under the impression that if the speed bumps, if they took the speed bumps up for a month for the winter or 2 months for the winter and put them back down, as long as the time period is less than 2 years, then that doesn't trigger a planning board hearing.
Right.
Am I, okay.
And of course, we don't necessarily have to have a hearing according to that language. Someone can come in and say, this is a modification I want to make to a driveway. We can decide whether we think it's significant enough to call a hearing or whether we want to approve it as a minor modification at the time. So I mean, I would think, I mean, there's the possibility that some driveway in town may very well come in the future and say they want to make a modification, and we could decide whether it was minor enough so that, and there was essentially an agreement between the members of the association from the start. We could probably say we don't need a hearing at all. I think the way the language is written in our change to the bylaw anyway.
So I'm just trying to get my head around this. So if they want to change the location of where it enters a public way, or if they want to alter drainage or something like that, then if it's existing, they need to come before us, or they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
They need to, yeah. If you wanted to change the curb cut, essentially, because you decided you weren't happy with where it was, you thought the sight line might be better, 15 feet or 20 feet because of some obstacle or whatever, or there was something else that was going to happen, they need to come back to the planning board and ask for approval.
Okay.
And that's for any driveway that we've approved, whether it's before 21 or after 21. Those modifications ought to be approved by the planning board.
Okay. Does any other board member have any other comment or insight or question? No. doesn't appear to be.
I'm wondering, do we want to try to be more specific about what's substantial or not? I know that was one of our questions. Maybe it's not important for this particular situation, but I don't think we ever got an answer last week to what is a substantial change and what is not.
You
And
mean in terms of trying to decide whether we want to hold a public hearing or not?
yeah, just for the future. I mean, it's kind of undefined, and it puts us in a situation of having a hard time figuring out whether it is or is not. If we wanted to, we could define it in a little more detail, and then it would be easier.
Yeah, that'd be something that we could work on, certainly. We could have a checklist.
Yeah. I mean, most of the issues seems to be generally related to parking and, obstructing the way and stuff. And I presume there may be some drainage ones when people want to move where the water flows after it comes off the road.
Well, they're
So-
changing the turnouts or changing the terminus, or, there's not that I expect there to be a lot of changes that people might propose, but there certainly could be some in the future.
Yeah, because we basically, with the bylaws, said that after it's built, we still want to have some authority over it, but it may turn out that we need to be a little more specific than what we have.
Well, I mean, my understanding of why we wrote that was that if anything rose to a level that was significant, it went through a public process, so therefore it should come back at least to go through a public process for people to chime in. And that's where we were going to have a say on, what happens. So if somebody decided, like Tim had said, to move the curb cut or to put in pillars and make a change and move stuff down the line 150 feet, and now all of a sudden light bleed goes into the neighbor's yard and they weren't expecting that, then, that's a major change. And we've had those situations. So I think that we were trying to put some language together that allowed us to weigh in on a major change that would rise to putting it back in front of the public for a continued dialogue.
Yeah, and certainly one of our big concerns was always access by public safety. So, the opportunity to have the proponent come back into the planning board gives us a chance to say to the fire department, the police department, how you guys have any concerns? Because when we design common driveways, it's really the fire department that we're talking to most often about turnouts and the terminus and the curb cut, how that gives them access and all that sort of stuff. So where it involves multiple dwellings, it seemed like we ought to be able to have some opportunity to discuss what the changes could be, so we get some approval from the other town groups that might be impacted.
Any other comments by board members? None. Does that concur with what you had your discussion with Mr. Falk and town council?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I had a brief conversation with Amy Questle this afternoon, and our conversation sounded very similar to Mr. Wheeler's. I don't disagree, and I think Mr. Wheeler provided a good summary in terms of how this would all shake out.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. Snelling, that you had proposed before the board?
Yeah, it would seem, thank you. I think it would seem as though if there was a question, we would start with the building inspector as the zoning enforcement officer.
He is the zoning enforcement officer, yes.
And so my understanding is that his, upon his determination, he might choose to escalate to the planning board.
Mhm. But in your specific question that you had asked the planning board, does that satisfy what you were getting or looking for?
Yeah, question 1, it sounds like pre-existing non-conforming. Question 2 and 3 would fall under the 2-year rule, consistent with pre-existing non-conforming.
Right.
So, yeah, in short, yes, that does answer those 3 questions.
Okay.
We all set?
I think so, unless there's another hand raise that pops up somewhere.
Well, I'll take care of that, being chair.
All right, well, we're all set. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and board members. We
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
We'll see you.
Good night. Okay, so we're ahead of our schedule. Do we want to pivot and talk about the letter that was sent to us for the
Do you have a
zoning?
time? Did you have a time for her?
She just sent the letter. I didn't.
So we
I
can
didn't
pick
put
her
it
up
on.
anytime.
Huh?
So we can pick her up anytime.
If she's in the audience, I don't even know. if
She is.
Oh, she
She's
is.
got her
Yep.
hand raised.
Oh,
She does.
okay.
Let me promote her.
Bring her on.
All right, Susanna.
Hello.
Good evening. How are you?
All right, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank
Welcome.
I made it this time.
you. Welcome.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to wait. It looked on the agenda that Lynn is at 8:45.
Yeah, well, we kind of finished up a little bit ahead of schedule.
All right. Is she in the audience already?
No.
Okay.
I can email her. I'll email her and tell her we'd started without her.
Well, you sent us a letter and I thank you for your time for putting this together. It's helpful.
Oh,
And
you're
hopefully
very
we can do something to make your lives a lot easier. I know you guys deal with a lot of crap and half of it's at our doing because we weren't very clear when we wrote the letter or wrote the article. So I had emailed the letter around to the rest of the planning board members, and I don't know if they've had a chance to look at them or not, but we were looking for changes to some of the definitions and some of the articles. So let me just start with this, Suzanne. If we, Susanna, if we accepted what you had proposed, does that satisfy what you guys want, or is this a starting point, or where do we go from here?
Yes, I think Lynn and I worked out the definitions for the most part. And I think she brought it up 2 weeks ago. One of the important things was the home contracting business. And the fact that if you had, for example, if I had a, someone living with me that was paying rent. I'm losing my words for some reason. But for example, my partner, Paul, if he wanted a home contractor business and I wanted one, it only says that you have to be a resident. So we could both technically have one. And that was a gray area. So we wanted to get the word owner in that definition. And then
So why?
Why?
Yeah. Why is that a hardship? If we had two people that wanted to establish businesses and run it out of one spot. Is that, do we have that now in town?
Well, it's my understanding that the bylaws say you're limited to one home contracting business per
Right.
residence. Is that correct?
I believe so.
So if there is no owner, because this was an issue on Oak Street several years ago, if there is no owner occupant
Mhm.
and they've rented out the house for, it was Squash's house. And there's the apartment on the side, and then there was the house. And so there was two different people renting the different parts, and each one had his own landscaping business. So how do you define who is the resident that gets to have the business? Because they can't both have it.
Got it.
So that was one of the stipulations. And the other part, I don't know if Rich is in the audience, but enforcing it was tough because the zoning enforcement officer can only contact the owner. They can't contact the renter. So if there's a violation, for example, having a contractor yard on the property, the zoning enforcement officer can only go after the owner and fine him, and he will come back and say, I have no control over what my renters are doing. And so it's very frustrating in terms of trying to control who's doing what.
Okay.
Sounds like that also would preclude a husband and wife each having their own business
Yes, I believe
by
it would.
allowing only one. Yeah.
Yes, or one person having two home contracting businesses.
Right.
And then with the vehicles and the weights, you would also have to say, well, whose vehicles count towards it? And I think that was listed. I don't know if I put that in the letter. I was trying to pull it up, but of course, trying to do too many things on one little screen at the same time isn't always easy. So there was a question of whether a vehicle, if it has the writing on the side of the business, so say for example, to Jeep Cherokee, and it says so-and-so contracting on it, but they say that's a personal vehicle that shouldn't count towards my home-based contracting vehicle limit. That was a gray area that we didn't know how to handle. So we were
But
hoping
wouldn't
for.
it be, if it was commercially registered, would that solve it? Or would that just add more confusion? If it was a commercial vehicle and was commercially registered to the business, then it can't be a private vehicle.
True, but I think a Jeep Cherokee has just passenger plates though.
Okay.
I don't know why I picked that particular.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to draw a distinction between if it was registered commercially versus registered as a passenger vehicle. And if it was paid for by the business, which, people are going to want to pass on the expense from a personal to a business. And I would think that would, but I suppose you could have a personally registered vehicle with your logo on the side of it and pass that off as a personal vehicle and not count against you for your total number of vehicles, commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, however you want to determine it, it's fine. It's just, and I know Lynn will say the same thing, is when we're trying to make a determination, we have to go by what the
Clarity.
bylaw says.
Yeah.
And that's where we get stuck if it's not in there, so.
Got it.
So can we talk about the resident and owner occupied stuff again? So the definition says the use of a portion of an owner occupied dwelling. And so your concern is that where it says a resident builder, I can be a renter as in the apartment of an owner-occupied dwelling, and as a result, apply for a home-based contracting business.
Yes, yes. Say, for example, I had 4 roommates,
Right.
but I mean, it does cover it because I am the owner. So it is an owner occupied building. But in the case of Oak Street, at the time, there was no owner occupying the building at the time.
So what does this, the use of a portion of an owner occupied dwelling, how would I, if that's the definition, does that cover us? Does that mean that no rental unit that isn't owner occupied, if someone rents the house, like there's some houses now in town that are just rentals, this would say it's not owner occupied, they can't have a home-based contracting business, I guess. Isn't that how I interpret that?
Kind of wish Lynn were here. She's better at this.
Well, she'll be here.
Yeah, it's a gray area, and
So, but your preference would be that we strike that with an off-premise trade by an owner builder, you want us to change resident to owner?
or owner and resident. If, say, someone buys a second property in town and they live in one, and then they have their business operating out of the other one, but they're not living there. So would that
So that
qualify?
scenario exists.
Yes, it does. And we've had that come before the board.
But if it is an owner occupied,
It can't be run from there.
Yeah, there was some sort of caveat. Oh, my brother-in-law is going to live there.
owner occupied though, so we'll wait on, we'll get Lynn on this one later.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Looking at the definitions here, how many dressmakers, people doing preservation, home cooking do we have?
Well, people
make
have
dresses.
licensed home kitchens and are producing a product in their licensed home kitchen out of their home. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out with the trend towards working from home,
Mhm.
seems to be with us forever now. Are our definitions and bylaws still appropriate? Or is there anything that needs to change?
Right. I mean, if someone has an eBay business out of their home and there's UPS is stopping by every day, and is that considered a home contracting business?
Say that again.
If someone decides that they're going to sell products on eBay or on Etsy or something, and they're making something, so
Or not
Etsy's probably a
necessarily.
better.
They could be buying and selling.
Right. Well, so I mean, either
way.
scenario really.
But is
You know,
that
if-
contracting? I mean, a definition.
It's
of
certainly a
contract-
home-based business.
It's a home-based
Right.
business.
Right.
Yeah, maybe what would happen if we changed home-based contracting business to home-based business and broaden it out a little bit? Because I think what you're talking about is going to be more and more likely as time goes on compared to some of these other things that are on the list.
If you
Right.
don't mind me saying that, I think the part about the contracting was the amount of equipment that is stored outdoors. Whereas having a home-based soap business, you're not really gonna have the same equipment storage outside unless you're doing really well.
Right, but suppose you were doing some retail distribution, online retail distribution business from your home, which is, especially if you got a barn. As Carolyn says, what if there's a line of UPS trucks outside of the morning?
Yeah,
Well, I think everybody during the lockdown, everyone had a line of UPS and Amazon
Yeah,
outside their house.
True.
There does seem to be a threshold at which it triggers a bylaw. So the person sort of doing the side hustle where they're selling collectible baseball cards on eBay or Etsy or whatever, should they be subjected to getting the special permit the way that the guy with the 3 vans and the dump truck need to be coming in every 5 years with a special permit?
the idea when we were behind this, when we were fooling around with this, is that we were encouraging people to sort of incubate businesses, starting, organically from home. And then once they raise to a level where they should be out of a neighborhood and supported in, a place that's more appropriate, then you sort of graduate and move on. And that's why we put some rules and regulations around how big you get before you need to move on, and, what the neighbors have to be subjected to until you get to that point. And if you get to that point, you're successful, you should be willing to move on, so I guess that's where we were coming from, but the world's
Yeah, and-
changed, so maybe we need to change.
Yeah, when we first put this in place, it was in response to the fact that a number of home-based contracting businesses had been established, particularly landscapers, that were in the residential zone, and that the building inspectors had never caught up with them in terms of saying, wait a minute. And so they existed and had existed for a number of years. And we said, well, let's see if we can give them the opportunity to come in and become legitimized through the process of going to the Board of Appeals. And I think initially we may very well have had some sort of language in here that said you have X number of, if you're in existence, you have X amount of time to come in and talk. We had a sunset in there somehow.
Yeah. Well, we
And a number of businesses came in as a result, which was what our goal was, so we could begin to harness them a little bit. And then, as Tom talked about, control their expansion over time. So if they understood if they did get larger, they needed to move on and move into a commercial zone rather than stay in the residential agricultural zone.
Yeah. Which I think we do want to encourage that. What we've done now is we set the 5-year limit on the special permits so that they have to come back to us, so that they just don't have this indefinitely. But one of the things that we are seeing is people coming into town looking for cheap, well, relatively cheap land compared to commercial, thinking that, the farmland's going to be less expensive. And that's where we're seeing people want to have their contractor yards and their equipment storage and everything else, because they are growing, but they don't want to pay for the commercial land or the commercial leases. So I think we just need to protect the town against that type of business coming in, trying to save. I mean, they're trying to save money, which you can't really fault them for that, but not at the expense of the neighborhood.
agreed. We'll let the soap makers alone for now.
Thank you.
Unless they get really big.
Unless they get really big, right?
So I also looked up the if you see in that letter, I had a link to a handbook of definitions from the Planning Association.
Mm,
And because I was watching the one from 2 weeks ago with the discussion about floor area. So I added a definition of floor area if you wanted to review that to see if that was a little more straightforward. Where, do you want me to read it?
Sure, please.
Okay. Remove the existing definition and replace it with the following definition, which is the sum of the horizontal areas of each floor of a building measured from the interior faces of the exterior walls or from the center line of any common wall separating two buildings. The floor area measurement is exclusive of areas of basements, unfinished attics, attached garages, or space used for off-street parking or loading, breezeways, enclosed and unenclosed porches, elevator or stair bulkheads, and accessory structures. So, and then I added a little footnote there that if the contractor or the architect has a CAD program, it's going to calculate the square footage easily for you.
Mhm.
Back when I was doing that, that was one of the things I did for condos, because they always needed to know the square footage.
so
we
stair
wanna-
bulkhead means what?
I took it to mean the part that sticks out from the house, you know, with the Dorothy doors that you pull up to get into the basement.
But an elevator bulkhead would be the whole structure?
I thought the bulkheads were for the override for the equipment, like at the
Up
roof
above.
area. Mm,
Yeah, I thought that was up above too. It's usually an extra, it's the fly space.
Okay.
mhm.
So in essence, this would, right now, we're very exacting, right? It's a pain in the neck because we include all the interior spaces of only those rooms that are used, bedrooms, you know, no hallways, no bathrooms, just bedrooms, kitchens, living rooms, etc., right? So that
Right.
this would increase the area of a structure that would be measured significantly, right?
Yes.
So now, so is there any detriment? Is there problems with doing that to, in other parts of the bylaw?
Well, when you compare, because usually this is in reference to putting an in-law apartment in,
Right,
or at least in our experience, that's where it's been an issue. I think it would be more favorable towards the in-law apartment. If you have a house and you're taking out all the bathrooms and closets and stairways, there's not as much left
right,
to figure out the square footage for the in-law apartment, even though the in-law apartment, you're also taking out the bathrooms, the closets and everything, but the percentage of square footage of the in-law apartment that is bathroom is a lot smaller than in the main house. So I think it would make it easier for someone to fit in it, to be able to build an in-law apartment.
okay, good. I think that's
Are-
good.
Do
Is
we
that what we're
differentiate?
encouraging?
We're encouraging.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do we differentiate between finished and unfinished basement?
We should.
Is it, right, because it didn't sound like in that definition, it just said basement.
Yeah, and then it said unfinished attics, so it probably should add the word unfinished before the word basements.
Mhm.
Because sometimes that
we-
can add 1,000 square feet.
Right, so we're rewarding somebody if they have a finished basement, basically.
Yeah,
Okay,
Well, you're rewarding or not, you're including it in the living space.
correct.
Yeah,
But this will also affect your conversation from before about non-conforming lots and non-conforming structures, because that square footage will also increase. So the amount of coverage that they can have on a non-conforming lot is going to include a lot more than it would otherwise under the current definition.
Mhm.
And, oh, and I just wanted to say about how much lot gets taken up by a non-conforming lot gets taken up by a structure. I think most of the limit is going to be by the septic system. So you don't have to worry about them having all building and only 5 foot of grass around the whole building, because you're going to have the leach field.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the green area requirement's still going to be in existence, and that's what 70-something%, isn't it? So in a residential zone, the opportunity to increase the footprint of a single family is significant. I think you're right in regard to the septic system design dictating how many bedrooms, which probably implicates what goes up on structures too, because we were talking about whether we wanted to allow second floors or not, you know, in terms of projects. But if the septic design allows it, you know, are we proponents of saying, no, you shouldn't be able to add a second bedroom or a third bedroom or whatever on the upper floors, even though the septic system can be designed to accommodate it? You know, it seems like if Board of Health says fine, an extra bedroom ought to be all right with us. At least that's how I feel.
So on conservation, we've definitely come into some issues where septic systems are approved for something like that. Like on Oak Street, the enlarged septic would never have been, if it was a new build, the Conservation Commission would not have been in favor of that septic system, what they had to do to accommodate the larger structure.
Because it impacted some of the
Because it
provisions.
was within the buffer zone, and
Okay.
it was the only place that they could put it to accommodate the larger structure, which had already been built. You know, we were kind of backdooring a lot of stuff on that project.
I mean, isn't that an odd case, though? I mean, if they came in initially and said, we want to add these extra bedrooms, we need to expand the septic system, we need then to go into the buffer, would you have said, in a normal situation, would you have said yes?
I'm trying to remember specifically. I feel like that one was much closer than we would have it. If I remember correctly, where they needed to put that expanded tank, we would not have been in favor of. But it was the only way to make the house livable at that point.
Right. So
Um,
normally you'd have said no.
correct.
Okay, so then the system would have worked if the building inspector hadn't issued the permit prematurely.
Correct.
Okay,
Well, and they also started building without
Yeah.
a permit.
without a
Yeah.
permit.
Yeah. So
I mean,
yeah, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on that one.
yeah. I like that change to floor area.
Yeah,
If
I
that's
think it
easy
works.
for everybody, it seems like the building inspector would welcome that too, so that may be a no-brainer, right?
With that one extra word.
Yeah, just unfinished, just like you've got an attic before basement.
Mhm.
Check. And you pulled the service establishment one from the same document, right?
Yes, yes. They had about 4 definitions for everything. So,
About 4?
yeah, there was, for example, for floor area, they had one for commercial floor area, residential floor area, gross floor
Huh.
area. So I
So
had
do you
to,
think we should be looking at enhancing the bylaw with that amount of specificity? Tom says no.
Oh, I mean, Charlie used to joke about the fact that he'd have to get a wagon to tow around the zoning
Right.
bylaws
Right.
because we made them so voluminous. So
Let's send
like,
him to
I
Weston.
can't carry it into my arm. I'm not interested.
You don't, you don't have trouble with this definition with commercial structures the way you do with residential so far, right? I mean,
We haven't really seen anything come across commercial, really.
yeah. I mean, most of the commercial stuff that's happening is new and, you know, people aren't at, yeah, so.
Well, there is that one odd building that's coming before zoning right now.
Oh, Banador,
No,
No,
the-
no, this is the house that is basically on the on-ramp to 495.
oh, Taylor Road, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, which is, it's been 2 years since it's been used as residential agricultural. So they're looking at it being commercial now. Square footage, the floor area hasn't been an issue. It's been everything else. But that is one case where floor area would, whether it's residential or commercial, might make a difference.
Yeah. So those service establishment, did you have, were there multiple choices and you like this one the best?
Probably. Would you like me to go look it up?
Well, no, just, do you remember why this one appealed to you more?
I thought of it in terms of the town. I didn't think I needed to include some of the larger definitions. I could pull it up if you would, you know, it
No,
would
I
take me a
think-
minute to pull it up, but
I think we like your idea of simple.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because I'm looking at it in terms of how do we make a decision? And so I wanted it to be as clear as possible.
any chance you can read it? I can't pull it up and keep an
Sure.
eye out for Lynn at the same time.
Okay. Service establishment, any establishment whose primary activity is the provision of assistance as opposed to products to individuals, business, industry, government, and other enterprises. So it's service as opposed to products.
Right.
And I like that. I may want to reconstruct the sentence because I want to make sure it reads the way we want it to.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about individuals. It sounded like a different kind of service establishment, but I didn't want to take it out either.
So what kind of services are we trying to cover? Like a home masseuse, like a limo driver, like a
Tax prep.
tax prep?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
wasn't
kind of-
really- Yeah, I wasn't really sure. It's in our table of principal use, but we
Right.
just never defined it.
Yep.
So I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to, if someone was going to come in as, again, say a landscaper or something saying, whoa, no, we don't have a home contracting business. We have a service establishment. We service people. So I thought it was important to say, no, service establishment is this, and it's definitely not contracting.
I like it.
It is still a little vague though,
Hmm.
where it says and other enterprises.
does it create more problems, or does it help when you give examples, you know, including but not limited to tax prep, you know, kind of some of the things that, so that you can use it examples? Or does that make it harder?
Well, it's a little hard to see into the future of what's going to happen, but I think I'm wondering if it's to differentiate between food service, fast food, Dunkin'
Yep.
Donuts, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But isn't that a product then?
You would hope.
Right.
So I guess it is covered then. It's just before this definition, we had no idea what it was. So we had to go find a definition for it. Which is why I also included sales room, so that there was a differentiation between service establishment, sales room, fast food. I'm glad it's not me that forgot this week.
She had trouble getting onto the conservation meeting the other night, and I don't really know why, because we definitely had other people attend. I'm wondering if she's having trouble again.
If she's at her house in Berlin, she's probably having trouble. She usually has to go over to her daughter's house in Northborough to get on the internet, to get onto Zoom.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's dedication.
Yep. It actually just occurred to me, I can pull this up on my phone.
Yeah, but that planning dictionary is like 400 pages.
Yikes.
Yeah. Anything you ever wanted to know. I think one of the things we needed to clarify was the noise level limits, which I believe we discussed and you're aware of already.
Mhm.
And then the last one was based on the conversation 2 weeks ago, was to add non-residential use to the title non-conforming structures in section 1130. And so that it differentiates between residential and non-residential. But that was purely just a note based on your conversation 2 weeks ago, where you had talked about, or actually I should say Rich talked about it, that there was non-conforming structures, and then down below it said residential non-conforming structures. And so there seemed to be two different qualifications, and he just wanted that clarified.
We still have a whole list of issues with that whole non-conforming structures and uses section. I have a list of decisions we need to make from the discussion we had last week.
Well, if you want to unpromote me, I could try to call Lynn and see what she's up to.
Yeah, it's 8:55. It's so unlike her.
I know, yeah, she usually comes in very early to meetings.
She must have assumed that she carried the ball last time. It was your turn this time.
I know it. I was here like at 7:13. I'm like, I am not gonna miss it this time.
So Susanna, I don't know how to unpromote somebody. It's not when you pull up the list of allowed things. So if you want to just shut off your camera and mute yourself, because I can remove you, but I think it removes you from the whole meeting.
I will do that now.
And that is
Get a hold
not
of
the
her.
goal.
All right, I'll be back.
Okay.
So are we fine with the definition of contractor yard and sales room?
So it's not really displaying properly. Tom, can you read sales room?
Sure. So sales room, a building or any part thereof in which only goods which are not readily portable are kept exposed for sale or auction by a retailer or wholesaler. Showroom. Term is used in the table principal use regulations, commercial uses, page 5. So when this came up with that property that was down on South Street, where somebody wanted to put a sales room in to
Property
showcase
on
what they wanted to sell.
Which property on South Street? The one that's currently for sale?
I believe so.
There's lots of people sniffing around at that, but the conservation restriction is really keeping a lot of stuff in check.
Yeah.
Is that business or RA?
Wait,
Um,
which
Is that
one are we
Commercial
talking about?
Village?
The house on 5 Corners there, right near you two.
So the front is commercial village and for 250 feet back from the street, and then it turns to residential agricultural. So half of there's 2 steel buildings that got built. One is probably in the commercial village zone. The other is in the residential agricultural zone. Clearly, I mean, I think if you put a tape on it, the first one might be partially in the residential agricultural zone too. But in a commercial village zone, most of the uses that the guys are talking about for a structure like that wouldn't be allowed anyway. So that's been the deterrent, as well as your wetlands, your rivers bill and stuff like that come up the hill, but not to the buildings, I don't think, do they?
Not to that house, but the driving range is
Oh,
certainly, that
You're
has,
talking,
Oh,
you're talking about Ronnie's as
Yeah,
opposed
no,
to,
I was talking about the one at 5 Corners.
yeah, we're talking about the one in.
isn't that
across from the
all
post
one
office.
property?
No, because the one we're talking about is
Just the
immediately
house.
across from the post office between South and Pleasant, and goes down to the mill pond.
Oh, yeah.
Where are the buildings you're talking about? I thought it was just a house.
No, there's
There's
2
some
big
steel
steel
buildings
buildings behind.
Oh, really?
That's where he had all his automobile collection.
Huh.
Yeah, but you're talking about Ronnie Wheeler's, but a substantial amount of that, of course, is under the conservation restriction.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, I mean, that comes all the way up to the T's practically, doesn't it?
I believe so. There was only a small
might-
portion in the front.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tim, when you and I went through that document, it's pretty clear.
Hmm.
You know, there's a sentence in there that says the earth and or vegetation shall not be disturbed.
Right.
So
Yeah, the Woo Sox wanted to build a facility there for
there's Lynn.
their underage kids, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we had someone come into conservation the other night. They wanted to build a church there and they wanted to put their parking lot on the conservation area part. And I'm like, no.
If they want to build a church, send them to up behind the vet.
Up behind up by
Wilson's.
Wilson's. Yeah.
That was floated by a couple of times.
Yeah, if you want to spend enough money, you could probably pull that one off, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, look, they're both here.
Yay. All right, so actually now I can split my screen and I can pull the document up.
Lynn is muted.
That's all right.
Easy.
I know, Tim likes Lynn muted, best of
Oh, I-
all. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't muted, was I? Uh-oh.
Good evening, Lynn. How are you?
I apologize, I forgot all about you guys.
Yeah,
How did you
it's one
forget
of the
about
other
us?
of you, that's for sure, right?
I think we made some headway.
Oh, yeah.
We think that your floor area is a good one. We think the service establishment is a good one, and the sales room we were just debating. We don't have any issue with that one, I don't think.
Well, I
Mm,
guess
and if
I
I-
didn't, Susanna was responsible for the majority of those. And I just think it's a good idea. The definitions help us a lot.
Right,
Mm.
Because when we have an issue with someone who comes in and says, well, I'm a this or I'm a that, well, there's no definition in there that we can nail them against, you know what I mean?
yes. Yep,
So what you guys think is a definition, I'm sure in most instances will be fine with us. It's just having a definition.
got it.
So Lynn, a question that I had asked Susanna, under service establishment, is it more helpful or less helpful for you guys to have an example or two? Like a sentence that says,
Like or
including,
as,
yeah, or including but not limited to, just to kind of help give you something to hang your hat on when you say that is like that or that is not like that.
yeah, but they'll argue it anyway. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's more strength to it. What do you think, Susanna?
Well, I didn't know, that's why I was deferring to you, but it will help, definitely. You know, it'll give the feel of it. If you say accountant, they can't come in and say landscaper and have it be the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, because technically, you know, a gas station is a service establishment.
Right. I mean, so isn't a hair salon. You know, so is a hair salon
also
something you
could be a
want
home
to
occupation, which also
Pardon?
could be a home occupation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were throwing out like tax prep, masseuse.
Do you remember
think of-
when the other side of 495 when the state police went in there
Yeah,
and raided the place?
yeah.
The massage parlor.
Yeah.
It took the
Wasn't that
state-
in Bolton?
No, it was in
No.
Heritage Mall.
on the corner of Gates Pond?
Yeah,
And,
Heritage Mall.
uh, And the state police had to investigate for almost a year to decide that there was something going on.
Wow.
Undercover.
So does that help if we throw in a couple of items?
I don't see why it wouldn't. What would you be looking to put items in? What would they be?
Well, we just those couple that we threw out, you know, I don't know. I mean, we were trying to see if we gave it a little bit more, you know, not teeth, but give it a little bit more color. That would it help or would it hurt? Would it, you know, and then you could, but say that, you know, it's similar to this or not similar to this or whatever. But like you said, it opens the door for somebody to argue that, well, it sort of is, or, you know, however they want to make their case.
The only thing is going in the negative and saying something that can't be a service establishment. And I don't mean by specifically saying it, but involving heavy equipment, this, that, or the other thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It does not, you know, in other words, you give your definition and then you say, which does not involve the storage, maintenance, something that says what you wouldn't allow without enumerating it individually. So that a service establishment couldn't be considered a gas station or couldn't be considered an auto body shop.
Well,
You know,
certainly hazardous materials could be a criteria, something that doesn't involve hazardous materials.
This, yeah, the storage or use of hazardous materials. Something like that.
Right.
And then you could say, yeah, well, you have paint sprayers, you know, when you have an auto body shop or whatever. So therefore it doesn't cover you. You're never going to make it perfect. I appreciate you trying, but at least some kind of a definition, and I'm sure Susanna would agree, helps us immensely.
Yeah, because even just looking at the table, although this is only allowed in commercial, the service establishment, being able to say how a service establishment is different from a restaurant is helpful, and how it's different from business and professional offices, which is what I think this service establishment does. But business office, if you're an accountant, are you a service establishment or are you a business office?
Well, like Tom was saying, tax prep, you know,
Yeah.
it's only a limited time a year. You do it out of your spare room in your basement.
Oh, no, this is a service establishment is only in
Gotta be in
commercial
commercial use.
village.
Oh, right.
Well, unless you want to change that.
It could be a home-based service establishment, though.
But it's in your table. I'm
In your
looking at
house.
the commercial uses. It's special SR, whatever that is. Like, you know, I should know this, right? SR is only under commercial village and commercial, and it's not permitted anywhere else.
What, right, but the commercial zone also allows us residential uses, so you can have a residential use that houses a service establishment as a, you know, accessory use, but it needs a special permit and site plan review, which gives you guys control and the neighbors an opportunity to chime in. So if someone comes and says, I want to do tax prep in my front room, and they come in and go through the process, probably you'd all be fine with it. But if they want to run a beauty salon in their residential unit, you might say, you're using too much of your space. It's not going to be a predominantly residential use anymore. And no, you know, you've outlined the whole first floor as salon, and the second floor is where you're going to sleep when you have a chance, right? So
Yeah, and one of the things too is we can define some of this in a special permit. In other words, we say you can only have 3 employees, you can only have 4 cars.
yeah,
But when it's just site plan, we're somewhat limited as to putting any conditions on the approval. So if when you're, you know, going through, you just, this comes up with our current case. By the way, has 275 Central Street approached you yet?
mhm.
No.
Interesting. But we are doing site plan for them. So we really don't have a vehicle to say you can only have 3 cars, you can only have 2 employees, because it's just a site plan. Do you know what I mean? So there is an advantage to having a special permit in that,
they proposed what kind of use?
who
275,
Central.
wants it as office space,
okay. That one,
that one. The hearing is continued to tomorrow night, but he's already asked for a continuance again, because he hasn't had time to meet with the folks that we told him he had to go talk to.
and you sent them to us.
Yes, well, in the bylaw, he has to go to conservation and get a letter, and he has to go to Board of Health and get a letter before we entertain, which neither of which he has done. But we said planning board, who else, Susanna? We sent him to talk to the building inspector. Oh, the fire and safety, the police.
Mhm.
Because the police, well, the inspector for the fire has already sent us a letter basically saying that he's all for having access on Taylor Road.
I don't think anybody would feel differently. Except for the guy who owns the property.
Yeah, it's a lot of fill to get a driveway and a lot of clearing of the trees to get it to work. I think there's also a guardrail that they might have to take down.
Why can't he span that with a bridge? Why does he have to fill it? Isn't it like a pretty deep V?
Yeah, well, filling is actually cheaper than having it structurally designed, and then there's a lot of approvals on that and
Right.
maintenance. So I would think dirt and rocks was a lot less maintenance.
Right.
Could be wrong.
But in any event, like in that, using that as an example, he's saying, well, I'm only going to have 3 employees. Well, once we declare it's office space, he could turn around and rent it or sell it to anyone who could use it for most anything. And there's, no limitation on the number of employees or anything else, because it's just site plan.
I'm curious how the move in the driveway to Taylor Road came about.
At the request of fire and police, because the entrance right now is almost right at the light, and it is when it
Right near the on-ramp.
yeah, and it's once you pull into the driveway, it goes uphill and makes a right-hand turn pretty quick. And I think they were more concerned with the amount of traffic coming and going out of that driveway. Especially, say you wanted to pull out of that driveway and turn left to head into town at the light. You'd have to cross 2 lanes of traffic, one of which is going onto the on-ramp, and also the oncoming traffic.
Well, and the police chief suggested maybe we do right turn only. The only problem with right turn only is people that want to take a left but take a right. The first thing they're going to want to do is turn around. And where do you turn around?
Gates
So
Pond
any-
Road.
Have you seen the latest
Go
plan?
ahead.
Have you seen the plan that he submitted that was drawn up? Okay, we'll have to see if we can't get you one. Because 18 feet, you know where the fence is on the property? Or at least when you drive by there, you can take a look. 18 feet from the edge of the road is in the power of the state, the widening of that road.
So if they ever widen it, what the heck, he's gonna need a launching ramp to get out of his driveway.
An elevator or a helicopter, yes. So anyway, he is supposed to come see you, and so forth, and he claims to have been too busy. And we'll see what happens tomorrow night, because, you know, the hearing is extended at the discretion of the ZBA. And when you go 2 extensions, which he has had, this will be the second one, and you've not accomplished anything.
Your patience wears thin.
Maybe we vote on what you submitted and you haven't submitted everything you need, so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't even emailed conservation to find out when he could, come.
Same thing with us.
Did he come to the ZBA before he started rebuilding the house?
No,
Wow. I can see the driveway making a big economic difference in his investment. Probably should have gotten that sorted out first.
well, if you take a look out on, and do his name, I just did it in one of the 2 Worcester County registries of deeds. This is not the first rodeo for this gentleman. Over the last 5 years, I think there were 12 entries of purchases.
Yeah.
You know, he's part of that, if you've seen on TV, We Buy Ugly Houses. His email is their email.
Oh, really? Huh.
So I'm not sure about the naivete that comes forward, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well,
now
so
that
you're coming about him selling it and someone else, you have to be prepared that someone else,
selling it or leasing
maybe
it,
the owner.
he's not gonna live there.
Right.
Okay,
Father on Sunday.
so,
And he would always promise to be better when he got out.
And he bought it at auction, right?
I
It was
don't
listed.
think so.
It was listed?
It was
It went
listed,
up
yeah.
to
It was,
auction, and there were no takers the first time. But, he did buy it from the bank or whatever.
Right.
The place across the street from me has been sold too.
Yep, heard about that.
Which is why I'm anxious to get a definition for contractor yard
Yep.
and service establishment.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Mr. Cotting put a significant conservation restriction on probably 2/3 of that land. So, and I told the building inspector about that. So we all need to be diligent about that one, because
Which
the
one?
greenhouse is on a conservation restricted portion of property.
Oh,
It's
All the
technically illegal, yeah.
I was unaware of that.
which property is that?
Nature's best.
Across from Lynn.
Directly across, you
Oh,
know,
I know where Lynn lives. Oh, you mean Mo's?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ah, and do we know anything about who bought that or what they want to do with it?
we know that they have contractors licenses.
Ah,
And I believe they also have a coffee shop,
Donut shops.
donut shop. Yeah.
Well, it's residential agricultural.
it is,
This is,
the whole thing?
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was part of Mr. Cotting's estate.
yeah.
I didn't either.
Huh, wow.
And I've
Not waiting to
read
see.
through that CR.
Well, look at the CR, because you'll see that extra page that shows that parcel, and there's a line that goes back across, because the land goes across the tracks and out to a point, and that whole extension is included in the CR, but it comes all the way to the frontage and all the, as far as I'm concerned, all the greenhouses in the CR as well.
Huh.
Wow.
Thomas went
So-
down there to have a chat years ago and decided not to stay.
That's more tactic.
Right, so,
Yeah, was Mo alive then?
yes, yeah, way back.
Yeah.
When he was
Yeah.
chopping chicken heads off in the basement and throwing them in, it was one of the, I think it was the Larry, the building inspector, had that experience.
Our town is gonna be so much duller without the Beamises and the Tarvis.
So, under contractor yard, or components used by the owner or occupant of the premises. How do you interpret occupant?
Occupant could be a renter, it could be a leaser, or it could be the owner occupant.
Okay,
Or do you want to strike that and just keep owner?
I don't think so. This is only applicable in the limited industrial zone.
Okay.
Which doesn't allow residences, right?
Right. Let me look at
Right,
that
so-
again.
So if that property is in the residential agricultural, how, I mean, they've just run the business.
They built the greenhouse in a area that was, I mean, the Conservation Committee has decided in other instances that land that Mr. Cotting had under a conservation restriction could be used for the sale of agricultural products, right?
Yeah, it's very tight. It's like 3/4 of what is sold has to be produced on the
Yeah.
land, and so it's
So-
not just selling.
No, but you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
So I don't think that the town was prepared to just say, bang, you can't have a greenhouse here and grow plants that you sell,
Right.
because initially that was the objective. They were growing product and selling it, but that went by the wayside pretty fast.
Right.
Cause
And
it would
then-
work.
It morphed into just buying product and selling it, Christmas trees or potatoes or lumber or whatever. So,
Yep.
so it's never been really conforming to what would have been allowed if they'd gone through the process appropriately, or but we just need to all be aware that anybody that starts knocking on the door now saying, this is what I want to do, there's a CR on it, and we ought to check the language and send them to conservation to make sure that conservation's happy.
But it's also RA, which is
Yeah.
a problem, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think there's about 6 or 7 acres there. And 2 acres were carved out. And the 2 acres that were carved out that are not in the CR, were where the house and the barn are.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is all under, the conservation easement. And it doesn't even allow them to put any permanent structure up, even for horses or whatever.
Hmm.
It's kind of strict.
Yeah.
Well, just so you know, the realtor was selling it as
Of
3
course.
3 lots.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they think that they bought 3 building lots. I guess we'll find out.
People have to do their due diligence, and if they don't, we can't help them.
Right.
It'd be a bit of a shock if they paid $800,000 for just enough space for a house and a barn.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. And
Parking's
only a
better.
house.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
because it's
no.
residential, yeah. And then the other issue is parking. I mean, that's almost any business is going to require more parking than they have room for.
So we're all set. The contractor yard definition we buy into?
Is that,
I buy into. I think you guys usually make good judgments and tighten it up as much as you can. Susanna, do you have any thoughts for them to add or subtract?
No, I worked on this one quite a bit to make sure that it differentiated between what would be in a home-based contracting business and what would not.
Mhm.
So, for example, the house for sale at Five Corners, it would definitely fall under contractor yard because that's where they want to store all their supplies for, if it was the plumbers that were going to buy it. They wanted to use the house at Five Corners as a staging area for all their jobs. And so that's something that would definitely fall under contractor yard. And so if things like that, I mean, I wrote it before that, but when
You're talking
ahead.
about the intersection of Pleasant and South,
Yes.
or are you talking about Five Corners in West Berlin?
No. I'm talking about that down by the
By the
post
post office?
by the post office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Four-
only four corners.
Four corners.
Four corners.
But so a contractor yard only is used in the limited industrial zone. And what we're saying is that anybody that would want to come into that site, I mean, even without the definition, if they come in before we make this change to the zoning bylaw, we'd still say it's not a use that's allowed in that residential agricultural land behind or the commercial village land in front, right?
Yes, but now we can definitively say
Yeah.
you're proposing a contractor yard, whereas before we couldn't, other than to say that, well, this is what we think a contractor yard is, and we
Yep.
think that's what you've got.
Good.
Do we want to add the word in that first sentence, any land or buildings used for the housing, comma, storage or repair of equipment, vehicles, machinery? Because storage to me says that you're not really using the equipment, you're just storing it there. But housing equipment means you're using it daily and that's where it lives.
And you're also saying it could be indoors as opposed to external.
Mhm.
Correct.
I see no reason not to add housing, but it's up to you guys.
I just feel like it's
That's-
tighter.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
The only thing is would housing apply to parking it on the pavement outside? What if it said
Storage.
accommodation?
If it's equipment and it lives there, then yes, that would definitely. You know, if you bring the landscaping trailer back every day and drop it off,
I'm just saying, if you say housing, doesn't that imply that it would be inside one of the buildings as opposed to parked outside?
Or wouldn't storage? You're storing it outside.
right?
So
So either in, right,
Housing would
house,
cover inside, storage would cover outside.
Well, it's just a question like Carolyn says, does storage mean it's there for a long time or it's only there at night?
well, it says stored for use off-site, so I guess it could go either way, but you could say for storage and or housing, which would cover both inside and outside.
right?
I don't see a downside to adding housing.
Mhm.
So we can just put a comma in housing after insert housing. Storage, housing, or repair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Did we agree on the sales room one, or is that still for discussion?
Thought that was okay.
We're good with that one?
Yeah, I thought so.
And the service established one, we're good with it as is?
Yeah,
And the home contracting business one. Oh, that's separate, okay.
no, that
Yeah,
was
that's
separate.
Skip that one for the
Floor area
moment.
ratio, floor area.
Floor area as written, as Susanna wrote it, right?
The unfinished,
Yeah, we gotta
Basement.
put unfinished basements.
Unfinished basement, yep. Okay, and then if we move on to home contracting business.
Section 540.5.
Yeah, and 0.6, did we agree on those yet?
We have not.
Okay.
My only feeling about that section, that was a problem. We had someone who tried to get two home-based contracting locations, one his house, one his parents' house. I have a large house with just myself in it in Berlin. And I'm looking at renting, let's say, rooms. If I rent a room to somebody, could they come in and ask for a home-based contracting business? Is that okay with you guys, or?
Well, where did we put in owner occupied?
Well, it would be owner occupied. I live there.
So why wouldn't we want that?
I'm
Why
just saying,
wouldn't we want to allow that?
I've got 6 bedrooms, maybe 5 people would like to have a home-based contracting business.
So you have 5 pickup trucks in your driveway every night?
5 different letters on the outside of it.
Yeah,
Do we screw them and how?
Unmarked vehicles.
Yeah.
Unmarked vehicles.
right, because if you're renting 6 bedrooms, you've got 6 vehicles in your driveway anyway. So I think limiting the amount of equipment that can be stored associated with the home contractor business.
You already do.
Correct. So I don't, unless, I mean, you guys have way more experience with how people snake around these things, certainly, than I do, but I guess I'm not seeing the reason why we wouldn't let somebody do that. But I could totally be missing something.
What about having, I think we touched on this before, about having 2 home-based contractor businesses. And does the vehicle limit apply to each one, or to all the businesses as a whole? They have to divide up how many vehicles they're allowed,
well,
or do we
you know,
not allow to?
So, yeah, maybe that, I mean, is that the simple way out, just to say, you can only have one home-based contracting business at any
Dwelling.
dwelling?
That would be progress.
It's just, it's not defined anywhere.
I mean, I don't think, I can't see why we'd want to. I can see why we'd want to let someone have a home-based contracting business.
One.
I can see why we'd want that.
Yeah.
Because that keeps the blue collar nature of the town intact. I mean, someone can operate as that small home-based contractor out of their home.
I always thought your intention was for like the plumber, the electrician, who's an independent contractor, and
Right.
they've got a van and they just, they don't do anything at the house. They just go and provide services out of their vehicle. That was the intention, and I don't think anybody has a problem with that.
Yeah. So but beyond that, we don't need to set it up that there can be multiple home-based contracting businesses out of a single establishment. So maybe we just want to say it's limited to one.
One
That would be
business per
progress.
dwelling.
Yeah.
Right.
But we do still have the issue of the zoning enforcement officer only being allowed to go after the owner of the building and not the renter, if it's the renter with the home-based contracting business.
Right. So explain, so how does that work? He has no authority over, he only
Yes.
has authority over the property, not the,
Yes, so if there's a zoning violation by the renter, the zoning enforcement officer can only contact the owner and the fines have to be applied to the owner. So it's, I mean, it's in the owner's best interest to avoid the fines by getting the renter to comply. But if the owner doesn't really care and wants his income, the rental income, he's going to stall it as long as he can.
so I own the post office. The United States Postal Service is in non-compliance somehow with the building inspector's regulations. He can't do anything with the Postal Service. He can only hit me.
I believe so. That's
And
what
I
the-
have to use my lease agreement with the post office as leverage against them.
Yes, that's what the situation was on Oak Street when there was 3 landscapers up there.
Yeah,
Or it has to be written into your lease contract.
yeah, I mean, I
Another-
got a good, right, but most people aren't gonna probably have the type of lease agreement I got with the post office, because they're not gonna spend the time and energy with the lawyers, but, so then if we back away from that,
So where do?
can it only be the owner then, is that? No renters can run a home-based contracting business? Then if I rent a whole house, a whole property, I can't run my home-based contracting business out of it if I'm not the owner, if we were to restrict it that way. That seems short-sighted, maybe.
Why?
Right,
Why?
Well, suppose you have a property that's ideal for a home-based contracting business and you want to rent it.
Yeah,
Right.
right. I
You're
mean,
really
suppose
not-
a plumber rents one of Jay's properties and wants to run his business out of that house that
Right.
he's now living in.
Yeah, that's good.
Is there some way we can give authority to the building inspector? Or is that above our pay grade?
My understanding is he deals with the land and the owner of the land. What the owner of the land does with it as far as renting, whatever, that's another issue, not his.
yeah.
Well, a lease in a case like that should absolutely have a clause in it that says that only uses allowed by the town and the state,
Yeah.
No, it should say any
Operating.
violations that incur fines from municipal, state, or federal governments will be the responsibility of the rentee.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Right. You're gonna amend your lease contract there, Jay?
Well, I got that nice house on West Street that had a building next to it. Somebody could have put a little office in there, but nobody does that anymore. Nobody hangs a shingle out front and has a little business in their house anymore.
Right.
They want a unit in a multi-office building.
For the soap maker is going.
And the
Right.
dressmaker.
Yeah.
I don't, have we made any headway on that? This?
Well, I hear you want to limit it at least to just one home-based
Right.
contracting business per property.
Right.
I'm wondering whether we need to have a hearing or something to talk about that. Because what happens if you've got, I mean, in town and particularly, you've got contractors who've got kids and it becomes so-and-so and son business, right?
Mhm.
And then eventually the kids break out on their own. I guess that's the only example I can think of where you might have two different businesses in the same, if it's a big property, a big house or something. Maybe that doesn't happen very often. I don't know.
All of this would have to go before a hearing anyways, because they're all
Yeah.
zoning articles.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering how many people would object to it. Probably, it's probably pretty rare. Maybe a safe change to make.
You know, we can throw language together that says, you know, only one of these per dwelling, and it, you know, we could throw in language that said it had to be the owner of the property that ran the business, and throw that at the town and see what the response is. If people show up at the hearing and say, what are you doing? Then
Right.
we'd back. I
Right.
mean, I'm not inclined necessarily to back away from one per property, but I could certainly listen to people making a good argument that you wouldn't want to restrict it to just the owner of the property that could operate the business.
Right,
Well,
but then the problem with not restricting it to the owner becomes enforcement.
Right. But we could throw language together that accomplished both of those things, and then explore that with the building inspector some more, and the ZBA can think about it some more, and we'd have a hearing and people could come in and talk to us. Town council could look at it. We could, you know, so we could go ahead and draft up the language. It doesn't necessarily mean it's set in stone even in our minds. I mean, I think it is sort of questionable in our minds as to whether we go forward with both those options, but at least we'd be able to look at it and get some response from folks.
so by dwelling, do you mean one building that might have 2 apartments in it? Or do you mean a dwelling is one of those apartments, so there'd be 2 dwellings on that property?
No, I mean, I think what we're looking for is a way to contain it to just one
Business.
home-based contracting business allowed on. I mean, it may not be dwelling is probably the wrong term. I mean, it's per property essentially.
Per lot.
And if
Yeah.
you've got multiple units in a lot, it's still only one for that parcel, right?
Ooh, how would that work, say, down on Alden Drive? Isn't that one lot because it's condominiums?
Yeah. Are they divided through the house in the, or how does it work? Yeah, so it's,
Those are condominiums.
yeah, so the lots are all jointly owned. And I only own my half my structure.
Yep,
All the land is communal,
yes.
a homeowners association. Good. Thanks,
Yeah,
Susan.
well, no, I mean, that's how it normally is, but now Capes of Berlin, because of the septic requirements, is 12 little houses on 12 lots. So
Right.
you could conceivably have 12 home-based contracting businesses in 6 acres of land.
Yeah, I don't know how we restrict.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
Beyond-
theoretically, again, it's a plumber and a truck.
Yeah,
Which is fine.
Because- Right, because they can't store equipment and they can't house equipment. And
They just can't have it in the open.
right,
Which those lots are so small, there's no room to store it in the open anyway.
Well, that would be interesting to know whether or not that's considered one lot, because it is a community. There's a homeowners association.
yeah,
They're condominiums, so they own the piece they're on. But most of their land where their septic and everything is communal.
You have that on all of our over 55s and everything else.
Yeah,
But hopefully the over 55s aren't starting up
Yeah, but if you were a plumber and you moved into over 55s and had your van out front,
yeah. And stored a bunch of your stuff in your garage,
yeah,
your tools and some extra equipment, yeah.
you could theoretically do it. I don't think there's any provisions in their condo docs for that. I bet you didn't even think about it.
Yeah. I can't have a tomato in my front yard, but I
Can run a plumbing business.
can.
You guys get into some interesting questions. That's great.
Well, we have the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves and play. You guys are a little more restricted. Right?
And we get to deal with the results of your play. But I do appreciate, I mean, you folks have been great about trying to address these issues. I know that some of the questions are somewhat difficult and the issues that you raise are complex. But I appreciate your willingness to look at them and deal with them.
Try.
You did know that Tim is our unilaterally declared liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals, right? That's just so I get to call him at night, you know?
I heard
Exactly.
it was a love-hate relationship, though. All right, can we keep going? How about
Yeah,
the-
I like what we're doing. This is
All right.
good.
Yep.
So did we
So-
figure out on 540.5?
That's just adding one word, incidental, in front of materials so that
Okay.
it reads machinery and incidental materials used in the conduct of the business. And that's to limit how much materials are being stored, how much materials is being stored on the property. So they can't stockpile tons of piping for future jobs. They can only store what they're using for current jobs that they have now.
Good.
Okay.
Incidental materials used in the
Good with that one?
conduct of the business. And you're trying to lasso stuff that's been stored for future business.
Yes, so that it's, in other words, and to
I
differentiate.
know
it-
what yeah, I get what you're trying to do. I just don't know if if it's got enough teeth behind it. I mean, incidental materials used in the conduct of business. You know, if you're using, I don't know, 3 trailer loads of pipe in a year, and you bring it in because you got a good deal on it and you stock it in the backyard, is that incidental or is that you're using it throughout the year? Do we need to have this be a little bit more, defined? Or do you think this is good enough?
What would you suggest? Adding the word,
Well, you were trying to say your current job, and I don't know as if this captures that.
you're right, because it, in the conduct of the business, could be the conduct of the business 10 years from now, I suppose.
Right, or a year, or, in the case of, that I just gave you, you get a good deal on 3 trailer loads of pipe and you buy it.
So,
I've theoretically, I've still got to hide it.
Yeah,
I've got to either put it inside or screen it, right?
correct.
I believe so.
So I throw over a camouflage top over the whole 3 trailer loads worth of stuff in my backyard. And it's screened.
Doesn't it use the word external, no external storage?
Um,
Well, the rest of the sentence says, if stored outside shall be completely screened from public view.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So if I throw my tops over it, it's really not viewed by the public. Maybe.
Although it does say, and shall ensure that there is no outward evidence that the premises are being utilized for any purpose other than residential. So you'd have to convince everyone that you've got a yacht under that tarp.
Right.
Pipe-shaped yacht. Or yacht-shaped pipe.
I've always-
I'm just playing devil's advocate. If you guys are fine with that, then I'm okay with it.
Lynn, what do you think?
if we think it adds value, I think it's worthwhile, otherwise it's just gonna confuse the electorate at town meeting.
Well,
Okay.
at the moment, it just says machinery and materials. So that definitely includes your yacht's worth of pipe.
Well, and it allows you guys with the word incidental to then have, to explore with the proponent what it is they might try to accomplish. And you can say, you know, there's a limit to what we want you to store on this property, and our permit is going to specify that to some degree.
Yay,
We're going to,
incidental.
yeah.
All right. I'm fine with it. Then we can leave it.
Right.
Here's the bad one. Whew.
Which,
What's the bad one?
The vehicle one always boggles me. I don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, we don't either. That's why we're hoping you'd help.
Well, we just figured you'd handle it, you know. Look, Lynn, we had to leave the room. It's so problematic. Any vehicle displaying the name of or any advertising for the home-based contracting business shall not be considered a private use vehicle. A recent appeal here. So if I work for somebody and I don't have a home-based contracting business, I can't drive that vehicle home, even though it's the vehicle I'm given by my employer to use, right?
No, because we're only talking about the definitions under home-based contracting business.
So I'm
we're
just
not-
trying to figure out, would we allow someone to drive their plumbing truck home from their plumbing employer who is in Clinton and park it on their property? But if they were a home-based contracting business running out of that property, they couldn't park their vehicle there.
No, we're saying they could park it there, but it would count towards the total count of commercial vehicles for their home-based contracting business.
so in other words, you can't claim that it's a private, your private personal vehicle, even though it's all lettered up, and not count against the 4 or the 3 or
Yes.
whatever we have here, 2 or 3.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
I'm not thinking comprehensively enough. Okay, I understand where you're coming from.
So where's my?
I think that's
I'm looking at
fine.
the chart.
I like that.
Okay, so if you have a lot size that is greater than 160,000 square feet.
Yep.
You're allowed 2 registered vehicles less than 26,000 pounds and gross vehicle weight plus 2 trailers less than 12,000 pounds.
Correct.
So if your business is growing and you want to, you're reaching that threshold. If you're going to say that your pickup truck, which has the name of your business on the side of it, but does not have commercial plates, because I think pickup trucks can go either way on that. You say that's my 18-year-old kid's truck. He uses it for personal, it doesn't count towards
Right.
it.
If you put
And
this
you
in,
can't really
yeah,
argue with them.
if you put this language in, then yeah, you have some teeth behind it to argue with them.
Yes.
I see, yep,
Yeah.
okay.
Is there a way, Tim, that you'd be more comfortable if it was worded differently?
No, I was misinterpreting. I'm fine now.
I thought you were talking about the next one, Tim, about the noise level.
Oh, that's what that'll be. No, I'm fine with this one.
Okay. Now we can go on to the noise level.
It's not a zoning issue, it's a town ordinance issue. It can't be enforced by the building inspector, it ought to be enforced by the police department. How do you like that?
Yeah, you can talk to Chief Shartner about that.
Well, we talked to Richard about it, he doesn't want it either.
And I don't think the town owns a noise meter. Maybe you ought to purchase a couple this next year.
But so either way, it just either the 11 o'clock, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. should say 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. should say 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. One or
Yeah.
just one or the other. Yeah.
So we'll do that, that's easy, but what about is it your impression that the decibel level numbers that we're using are problematic and we ought to refer just to some state code? What I see in other towns is they reference a state threshold.
Yeah.
for
Hold on.
guidance, and then it doesn't end up being some number that we've just pulled out of a hat, you know?
Yeah. This really hasn't been a problem for us as far as being the ZBA, because this sort of thing only came before us because it was an appeal of the building inspector's interpretation that this law applied to 19 Carter.
Well,
I think there's one more thing to consider, and that is, as far as we read it, okay, there was difficulty interpreting what was allowed during construction, and if that was only during construction, because 19 Carter tried to say it applied to everybody all the time. This law, does it apply to every single individual business home in the town? I mean, if you have a pool party, are you subject to this law?
if I have a pool party and I make too much damn noise, my neighbor calls the police show up and tell me to quiet down.
Yeah,
I don't know if
But
they have any
you just
authority
voted.
I mean, I'm a nuisance then, right? I mean,
well,
there's
no,
some,
the police have a right to, you're
right?
disturbing peace, okay?
So,
I think what needs to be done is somebody needs to take one of those little decibel readers and go to the lot line and see what it takes to get to that level.
well, it doesn't take much.
That's right.
I'm still looking for a way that, in a lot of other towns, there's language that says it excludes those events that are permitted through the town, like public gatherings, essentially, that are permitted through the town. And if you're going to hold an outdoor concert routinely, it seems
Right.
like there ought to be a permit that's issued by the town,
I agree.
not
I
by the
think,
building inspector or the planning board or the ZBA.
right, I think that has been the problem. I think if it was one night, I don't think the neighbors would have complained the way they did. The fact that it was weekly all summer or however, I mean, it was many, many weeks. And they didn't get a say as to what time it stops, what time, you know,
Right.
they didn't get any input in it.
And
I,
it was compounded by the pandemic and because they couldn't do it indoors.
Yeah,
Because some of those things would have been held indoors.
sure. But I think it's a lovely thing to have, you know, to be able to have a concert on the common on a summer night. But I think it needs to be something that the neighbors get a say in as to the frequency and how long it lasts and all of that.
and
So
I
I think
don't,
requiring it to be permitted is a good idea.
right, I don't think that any noise level we would define would be met. I think they'd exceed it always. So for us to try to put into our bylaw some, either they're exempt from it because they're a public gathering and they have a permit from the selectmen, and then they don't have to comply with the noise section of our bylaw. I always looked at this section as being employed in construction and stuff like that, and where Solomon Pond was involved with the operation of you know, sweeping the parking lots and, you know, stuff like that. We had some language in there for them specifically, but I don't think I looked at it as a broad brush application that have impacted all the noise in town.
If you're the building inspector, do you feel that it applies to individual residences when you read the bylaw?
Well, Richard felt that way, I guess, right?
Right.
And I
It is-
trust, you know, I understand. He has more background on this than I do, so.
Well, I just ask you to read through it and pretend you're, you know, making a decision as to whether or not it applies to your neighbor. Does it apply to your neighbor?
I just want to circle back to the concerts. The state law, which is CMR 310 section 7.10, says that permitted events are exempt.
Right.
So they just have to be permitted, and
Right.
then they're
And-
exempt.
And by permitting them, you specify hours of operation and, you know, frequency and stuff like that, which gives, and again, it allows the abutters to have some comment, which,
Could I
Mhm.
suggest you talk to the selectmen? They have no interest whatsoever in becoming a granting authority.
I know, you know, that's what I've heard, is that there's not a lot of interest in getting involved with issuing more permits from that office, but
So
One
when
of
we
the
had
things
the,
that they could do would be do, in addition to individual permits, a seasonal permit
Oh,
for
absolutely.
X number of events.
right,
So like, rather than having to hold 3 hearings for a given location that's planning on having 3 concerts, they could hold 1 before the first concert.
Yeah, it's a summer concert series that consists of 8 evenings. And the noise ends at 9 o'clock. Or, you know, whatever, however many they want, whatever. I guess I was certainly picturing it as a lump sum seasonal permit.
so when we had the parade for the bicentennial or whatever it was there a permit issued for the parade?
Probably.
So who issued it?
Or was it a municipally sponsored event that was exempt from?
Oh, I think Eloise has her hand up. Eloise, sorry.
All right, to the rescue.
Hi, Eloise, sorry about that.
No problem. We did have to get selectmen approval because we also had to notify the area towns about the parade and, you
I
know,
thought I remembered something about that.
yeah, it was quite involved, but it was fun. It's the only one I'll ever do.
Eloise, only you would refer to it as fun.
And I think it should go up to 11 o'clock. 9 o'clock, they're just getting their instruments out.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, but if you have small children living in the house next door, 11's kind of late.
In the summer, they're not going to school anyway.
They're probably at the
Wait.
concert.
I'm sending my small kid to your house the next day when they're cranky, okay?
Not a problem.
And on it, that's not up for us to decide anyway.
Just the 11, 10 or 11 though.
Yeah, we'll deal with that one.
So, but as for the noise levels, the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs has their own policy of determining if it's loud or not based on the ambient noise.
Yeah.
So I'm just suggesting maybe that's a way to do it instead of hard numbers.
That's what I was suggesting too, is that when I looked at the state stuff, when it talked about ambient noise, you thought, okay, now instead of automatically saying it's just 55 or whatever we say, or 50 at night, which isn't very much at all, it's based on readings that are used in that environment on a regular basis, and then you work from there. But
So you take the readings when the peepers are out.
yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, Jake's
I'll
break-
just come back to say, do you mean this to apply to everything or just special events?
Well, and reading it again, it looks like it's everything.
And that's what I'm saying. Is that what you want? I mean, like my personal feeling, and again, not ZBA or whatever, but if my neighbor's making too much noise, I call the police, and then either the police determine that they're disturbing the peace or they don't, or
Right.
they tell them to quiet down. But would you, again, summertime, weekends, people who dislike one another, you've met a few of them in your travels, correct? Neighbors, not your neighbors, but I'm saying, I know last month you had a couple of neighbors that aren't fond of each other. And if they have the opportunity to utilize something like this, I think, you know, instead of having it apply to everyone, you may want to say something to the effect of activities open to the public or associated club, something along those lines, so that it would, you know, maybe the church has to apply, maybe 19 Carter has to apply, but you don't have to apply.
Well, how does that work if your home-based contractor wants to fix a dent in one of the vans over the weekend and is banging it out?
Then either the neighbor calls the police saying that they're disturbing the peace, or it's just a one-time incident. I mean, I think all of us could have a time when we're running a chainsaw or doing something that would, you know, drive the decibel level over what it should be.
That's
I
true.
think
All
if
the
you-
leaf blowers.
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
I said, yeah, in the fall, all the leaf blowers.
Yep.
And lawnmowers in the summer, although they kind of exclude that stuff in the bylaw.
Mm.
Just
I
take
was-
a look at it and see if what you mean is to have it apply to everybody, or if you really want to limit it to special events, and if you can find verbiage that would in fact limit it to special events.
You, is this a zoning bylaw?
Yes,
Why does it have to be a zoning bylaw?
I don't think it does, but it is.
No, I guess my question was, does it have to be a zoning bylaw?
I don't know, it's under performance standards.
So is the construction part of it a zoning bylaw, and there should be a different one that is completely separate from construction?
It is completely separate from construction. So,
But it includes construction.
yeah. Building construction is its own heading, and then below that, noise is its own heading. So they're two separate entities showing that it's not considered noise of building construction. Because your third heading is exterior lighting, which does apply to everybody. So you would
Right.
assume that noise applied to everybody also.
The building construction says all buildings shall be constructed in accordance with the bylaws of the town of Berlin, which is implying all those other instances where the building inspector is involved that doesn't involve zoning, right? As well as zoning. So if lighting is involved with everybody, you'd argue that the noise should be involved with everybody, and we've got this special breakout provision for regional shopping centers that are specific to those instances. We've got that section that says during construction, the site contractor should make reasonable efforts to limit noise associated with site work operations. But
That's got no teeth.
it doesn't say he's exempt from the 55. It just says he's going to make reasonable efforts. I mean, I don't. Yeah. I like citing the state ambient noise issues and all that stuff instead of using hard numbers. So I think we released we try to accomplish that. But that's not going to give relief to public events that don't have to go through the selectman's office. They're going to exceed that number.
And
And for
it's
us,
not just 19 Carter, it's both churches have, you know, fairs, fall
Yep.
and summer fairs.
activities on South Common, like Old Home Day or something like
Yeah.
that, I mean, you find lots of, yeah.
Eloise, didn't Old Home Day have to go through some sort of approval, permitting, something also the last time?
I believe they had to go before the selectmen.
Right, because I remember there
Because
was a
they
little
have
bit
the
of,
jurisdiction of the town.
right. So if Old Home Day has to be approved by the select board, why shouldn't other special events?
It can be forced onto the selectmen, you like it or not. I mean, that's,
It makes sense that they're that.
but
the
you
body
should
that does
probably
it.
tell them.
Okay,
Why don't you get a couple of forms so that they can look at it? And I would keep it simple, no more than one page.
And make it for multiple or
it's just-
individual activities.
Yeah,
You know, whether it's a one-shot deal or it's a series of
Series.
programs.
Well, you can check one shot deal, multiple things. I have gone down to my sister's in Walpole because she hears everything that's happening at Foxborough about 4 miles away. And it's
Wow.
clear as a bell.
I hear Hudson High School, their football games sometimes. Not all the time, but I certainly do.
Maybe we should invest in earplugs for some people.
Right, well, and that's part of it too, is I hear it. I say, oh, there's a football game tonight.
Yeah,
And if it bothers me that much, I shut the window.
exactly.
But that's
Or
also
call my
not
neighbors and say, how come you didn't invite me?
right. The Mancusos learned that one early. But I also do believe that I would feel differently if right next door, if once a week, there was loud music playing till 11 o'clock at night.
Okay, make it 10:30.
There you go.
Those are the nights you go out for dinner. You'd hit a movie.
Yeah, but yeah,
Well, I had one lady get very upset because the parade was gonna go by her house and then she couldn't get her car out. So we suggested you do it beforehand or after. I
right.
mean, if you're having it all the time, it's one thing, but if it's very seldom, it's
Right.
not, in my opinion, it's not a big issue.
I agree. Right,
Well,
but
we
if you
look-
were having a parade go by your house every Thursday,
Right.
that might be different.
Oh, I'd sell balloons. I mean, if I don't like it, I'll take advantage of it.
I think we have to think about this one some more, I guess. There's some stuff we could change and it would be appropriate, but I'm still not convinced it's in the right place, I guess.
Where is it in the other towns that you've looked at? Is it in their bylaws?
Yeah, sometimes it's in the zoning, but they have that clause that says, public events, permitted public events that are excluded. And we can't throw that in because there's no provision for that. I mean, we could throw that in and then force the hand and say to the selectmen, if you want to resolve this issue, then you need to take the control of permitting these events, and as a result, you begin to specify hours of operation and frequency and stuff like that.
That is how the state law is written.
Yeah. That's,
Do
I
do
guess
we
I'm
want
down.
to, do we want to invite a select board member to our next meeting?
Yeah,
And just kind of have the conversation about how we landed at them being the
permitting authority.
permitting authority.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
Or you can just write the bylaw and know that the selectmen will give you no money for anything in the future.
They don't give us any money now anyway, so.
Right, you throttled it back.
So you're saying you're overpaid?
Oh, yeah, like you guys. Well, let's try that.
All right, you want to move on to the next section, 11:30?
I'm just wondering, Tim, would it be better for one of your membership to go to put themselves on a select board? No, I'm serious. So that you get input from all three of them to know where you really stand.
Oh, you're probably right, Lynn.
So is your hand raised yet again?
No, I didn't raise my hand. Two of us.
Mr. Chairman, when you said you wanted to move on to 11:20, are you talking 11:20 PM?
No, no, yeah,
right.
Because it's now 10:20 PM.
Jay's ill, remember?
I have COVID. COVID, it's an excuse for everything. Because I think, I mean, I have a list of the questions we got to answer in there, and there's a bunch of them. I think it's going to take us an hour or something.
Okay.
Because we talked about them before, and we never really brought them to closure.
Right,
Right.
and I would like to read the thing that Tom sent or later this evening. Wasn't that about non-conforming? That was a presentation by KP Law.
Or Tim did. Tim sent that around.
Oh,
Yeah.
Tim sent that?
Oh, I sent that.
I haven't
too.
read that yet
Okay,
myself.
from the planning board email
I'm
account.
sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
Jason.
Oh, Jay sent it.
Jay sent that one, and then
But
I
it was
sent
up-
something, about
Yeah.
a
Horrible.
session that someone's doing in
Oh,
2
yeah.
weeks
Right, on the
non-conforming
24th.
uses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Before our
training
next meeting,
collaborative.
right?
Yep.
Before we meet
Actually, it was
again?
interesting because I
No,
hadn't.
we
Yeah.
meet on the 22nd.
Yeah, damn.
There's a lot of stuff online. What's the term for, what was the title of the seminar? There was a 2-word phrase that I'd never heard before, but it describes a lot of what we've been talking about. It's like your rights, implied rights by, where is it? Let's see. Well, actually,
Webinar series, vested rights and non-conforming uses and structures,
that's it, vested rights.
Right,
Thursday, the 24th. It's too bad it's not before our next meeting.
Yeah. Well, if you read online though about vested rights, it's basically about the rights you have if you've got, an existing non-conforming use or structure.
Yeah.
There isn't, I didn't see a lot from what I read that differed from what we've been discussing and what we were planning. I think we've covered every angle that I've read about, abandonment and all that.
Yeah.
Although I mean, that's why we have to have some discussion about that, because the abandonment thing makes sense until you think about the people in town who have gone to Florida for a few years, and then come back and, oops, what are we supposed to do? Demolish their house because it's non-conforming?
right, but if they're still paying the electricity and the mail's getting forwarded or whatever, I mean, there's abandoned and then there's not resided in.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's a number of topics like that we got to go over. We got to figure out what extend and extension mean. We never figured that out.
Well, I mean, we've got these ZBA people here. Let's do it. Let's,
Yeah?
hit it,
All right,
Jay.
we're not going after midnight though.
No.
You're gonna lose me far before then.
I mean, I can tell you the list of questions because I had them prepared here.
Go for it.
Number 1, do we move authority from the ZBA to the planning board for non-conforming use? Because in
Yes.
no other area can the ZBA allow a change of use, thereby changing zoning. We never brought that to a conclusion.
I
Well,
thought.
You
Go ahead, Lynn.
can't do a change in use either. It has to be explicit according to 40A. It has to be explicit authority in the bylaw. So just moving non-conforming to you folks does not change your ability to do the change in use.
But by it staying with the ZBA, you get to hold a hearing and include neighbors' input. True?
True. And put conditions.
And put conditions.
Yeah, I think you guys have more teeth than we would.
Yep.
But I thought the proposal we got was to move it.
I
This
don't
is
think
what-
that came from the ZBA, but
Oh, really?
one of your folks.
Not from me.
No.
Huh, I'm not sure where it came from.
So that's answered.
Good.
And then do we delete section A, i.e., does there need to be a provision for extension of an existing non-conforming use? So section A, let me just look at that.
So A allows for the extension of a use. B allows for the change from one non-conforming use to a less detrimental use. These are all uses. So
Right.
I take it that one is physical and one is, in other words, you're changing physical size or whatever. And the other one is a use change.
So the first one you say is the change or substantial extension of a use is a physical change,
That's what I'm thinking.
and that the change from one non-conforming use to another less detrimental non-conforming use has to do with the nature of the use.
No, but this is both under 1120, which is uses, 1130 is structures. So extension of the use might be,
Yeah,
you're selling flowers and you're gonna, see, I don't know whether extension means extension in time or extension in scope.
right.
If it was scope, it would mean you'd sell vegetables in addition to flowers. If it's extension in time, maybe it was, I don't know, maybe there's some conditions where it's only allowed for some period of time and you're allowing it to go longer.
Change or substantial extension of use.
I mean, the word extension gets used in the state bylaw,
Right.
but they never define it. I mean, in some
And you're
cases, I think they
surprised?
do define it as time, but I'm not sure they always mean that.
So the ZBA really doesn't want to be put in a position where you have to make a determination as to whether something's a less detrimental use.
One of the things that we try to do is to keep the town out of court.
Right.
And this is something that would be the source of litigation, is my feeling. You know, again, I go to the recycling of metals or junkyard, whatever. And now they want to put in a car dealership. And we say, nah, I don't think that's any less detrimental to a residential neighborhood than a junkyard. And then they choose to sue the town. And I, quite frankly, think they would win. Because I don't know who would think that a car dealership is less detrimental than a junkyard.
Right, so we have to take the opinion out. We have to change that so that it's not an opinion.
My suggestion was taking, I think it's 1120, the whole section out. If you're in a residential agricultural area and you have a pre-existing non-conforming use that would not now be allowed in a residential agricultural area, I think you revert back to residential agricultural. Now, Tim raised a couple of substantial issues, the least of which wasn't that you may have spent a great deal of money to build whatever it is that you built, associated with your business or exception. I just think the needs of the town are outweighed by that.
So, I mean, I'll be the guinea pig. I have a pre-existing non-conforming use in a commercial village zone. It's not gonna qualify as a use that's allowed in a commercial village zone if it ceases to exist for 2 years. I can't bring it back.
If we remove that whole section.
Doesn't matter. It's a non-conforming use, and if it's not in use for 2 years, it doesn't matter whether it's allowed in that zone or not. Your special permit goes away.
Would you feel better if it stated that you lose it only if it's in a residential agricultural area?
Probably.
And the last sentence in that bylaw, I think applies to everybody, that you lose the non-conforming use if you don't use it for 2 years.
Right. I agree with
Agreed.
that.
Well, then that would apply to your commercial area too.
Yeah. But I'm thinking back to this. I didn't use a good example. I was trying to think of a residential parcel that has a commercial structure on it that's been there for 70 years. And that business goes out. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use that's been discontinued for 2 years. I've got this structure that the town assesses for $500,000, but I can't use it for a commercial use anymore. Right?
That would be my feeling, if you're in residential agricultural.
So I've got a
Especially-
$500,000 structure I'm gonna have to rip down. I can't put a less detrimental use in there because that
Well,
use,
no,
that was,
You're mixing two things up here. One is abandonment for 2 years.
right,
Abandonment for 2 years, you automatically lose it. By the last couple of sentences in that bylaw.
Right. 1150.
Can the ZBA waive that?
yeah, you're
No.
right. Non-conforming use of structure, so if it's gone, it's gone. The structure that was a commercial structure in a residential zone, you can't do anything other than residential. Okay, I'm fine. Taking me, it must be late or something, huh, Jay?
Well, that's going to be front and center when we meet with the people that bought Mo's. Right?
Well, that's what I was thinking when Tim was trying to think of an example.
Yeah,
I
The
mean,
people at
that's
Mo's
the
have a farm
example.
stand.
I mean, they pay $800,000 for that property, expecting that at least they can continue what's going on there now. And we say, nope.
Well, what's
Right,
going
well-
on there now? A
Right.
farming operation with a farm stand.
Right. And really, it's just a
Yeah.
farm stand. It's not even a farming operation.
right.
Because the
Yeah.
greenhouse has certainly been abandoned for more than 2 years.
Yeah,
That's true.
So,
Do we want to give them the opportunity to go to somebody and appeal for a permission to change from the current non-conforming use to one that is less detrimental?
But it's not a non-conforming use.
It's in RA, right?
But it's a agricultural use that's allowed.
Ah, okay.
That they can continue to do.
Right.
Right.
Well, the argument would be that they'd have to produce X percentage of the product they sell in their agricultural
Mm.
sales area in town.
Correct.
Which is
So-
another issue because people question, what does the bylaw say? I think it says that they have to be produced in the area.
It doesn't say in the town.
I don't think so.
Oh, goodness. Thank God for that. I'm safe. Huh?
Right. So let's say, so these people, they also own donut shops, you said. So what if they decide to sell zucchini and donuts?
Are they growing the donuts in the greenhouse or?
They're making the donuts.
Only
But
if they live there, they would be allowed to have a home-based occupation.
Right.
The donuts they're not grandfathered, so the Neshoba Board of Health would come in and tell them they have to have a commercial kitchen and have a permit for a commercial kitchen. If you have a home kitchen permitted, you're very limited to what you can do.
Correct.
Yep.
That's why I don't understand how the other farm stand sells cider donuts every year. But
I believe those are made in a food truck. At least
Oh.
they have been in the past. I don't know if they're made inside now or not.
They're made inside in the little kitchen area.
Are they? Yeah.
the kids do it.
That's up to the Board of Health.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's Bridget, oh, I can't think of her last name. But it's Neshoba Board of Health. She would be determining that.
Right.
Not to keep you guys all night, but I mean, I think you've decided that in a residential agricultural area, you would, if someone abandons a use or wants to change the use, that it should not be allowed, it should revert back to residential agricultural, correct?
Yes. Do,
I'm afraid so. Structure used for sale of natural products, the majority of which are raised on farms of the town.
What section is
Define
That's in the
majority.
principal use table.
majority would be more than 50%.
Yeah, but is that weight or dollar value?
this is-
You're a troublemaker.
This is in RA, Tim, or what are we reading?
Yeah, agricultural and rural uses.
Okay.
Structure used for the sale of natural products, the majority of which are raised on farms of the town. So I don't even have to raise it myself. I can buy it from all the other farms. I can buy apples from Jerry and flowers from Golden Skep and other greenhouses in town and
maybe
I-
herbs from Holiday Farm?
yeah, so I don't have, it's, if you're promoting agriculture from Berlin, it seems like that's a reasonable parameter, but I'm a farmer, so, you can't trust me on that one.
Well, technically, most of the greenhouses buy seedlings from other locations. I mean, at what point does it become native to Berlin?
Well, it says which are raised.
Okay,
Emerson and I used to talk about this. The minute I start watering it, I'm raising it. So,
even if it's full grown.
Yep. Yep.
But it technically, it should also say and surrounding towns.
You think so?
I think so. I know you think so too.
I like a lot of the other surrounding towns too. I'm not there yet, but I mean, I could be.
But I think we've all had to get corn from Davidian at some point. And they're Northborough.
Ah. But you can buy 40% of your corn from Davidians as long as, or 45% as long as 55% of your corn comes from Tim, because it has to be a majority.
Yep.
Of all products, it doesn't necessarily, you can buy all your corn.
Right.
As long as that is less than, is 49% or less than your total produce that you're selling.
Right.
So back to, so if 1120 is eliminated completely,
Oh, God.
who crashes and burns?
Any commercial property that was pre-existing non-conforming.
And we've agreed that we're gonna put,
Right.
Where's
So
the-
do we take the whole thing out, or do we just amend it so that it says in an agricultural residential zone?
In a non-residential agricultural zone.
Okay. I'm so tired right now.
so in 1120, you wanted to apply to the residential agricultural zone. In the 1130, you wanted to apply to non-residential zone, right?
What's 30?
Non-conforming.
Because we have
Structures.
1140s residential and 20 and 30 are non-residential at the
But one
moment.
is structures, one is uses. So
Yeah.
uses could be also residential.
So I thought we talked last time about non-conforming structures under 1130 being applicable to non-residential,
Yes.
Yeah,
because we've got 1140 applying to residential, single and two family, right?
Right.
Yes.
So if you strike 1120, in cases where it's applied to the residential agricultural zone, does that help you guys?
Yes.
So,
I don't know that it's the ultimate answer, but yes.
but so it would still provide for you to have to face commercial uses in a commercial village or commercial zone that wanted to become less detrimental.
And I think that would be less of a problem. I don't know that, some problems couldn't arise, but I think it would be a lot less detrimental.
So we could start there at least.
Yes.
So change that heading so we eliminate the residential agricultural ability to continue a pre-existing non-conforming use that's discontinued or tries to become less detrimental.
Or change the title to 1120 to non-conforming uses in a non-residential agricultural zone.
Yeah, and then in 1130, we add non-residential agricultural zone.
So what happens to a non-conforming use in a residential agricultural zone?
If they want to change the use, it reverts back to residential agricultural.
Right,
That's their only option.
yep.
And I think that's consistent with what was intended because you allowed these exemptions because they happened before zoning.
Mhm.
So if they had a car dealership or whatever they had, you didn't close them down because it was now deemed to be residential agricultural, and you changed the bylaw that they couldn't do that in a residential agricultural zone.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in 57, when they voted zoning, that's the reason you go up the hill to POTUS's with the commercial zone, because they had the little label making operation in the building there. So instead of creating zoning and trying to grandfather them as a use that pre-existed it, they tried to protect it in perpetuity, but then we pulled the zoning out of that eventually, so.
So that would mean they could continue doing their label printing business. But if they wanted to go into a different business, they would revert to residential agricultural and couldn't do it.
Right.
Who's got to decide if whatever they're doing is the same business that it was before?
ZBA.
The building commissioner.
Yeah, well, he's not on the call, so that's a good place to push it.
Yeah.
Well, no, but that's where it lies because
Yeah,
we ask
First,
folks
right,
to go
Okay.
to the building commissioner first
right.
and get a ruling as to what they need. We can't unilaterally make decisions without a petition. And we want something from the building commissioner so that the petitioner knows exactly what they need and doesn't turn around and say, yeah, now that you've got the special permit, you also need a variance.
let's play with that and
There's several places in town where we've got commercial businesses in RA or right, because if you go down by the train stop restaurant and the old mushroom factory, and that's all residential.
no, it's commercial village.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they're all in the commercial village zone. McCann's ice cream, part of that might be, the building might be,
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, so that's now Bridge
frontage-
Realty.
the frontage at McCann's ice cream, on the other side of the tracks from Village Realty is outside of the zone, but
Just looking at the zoning map here.
but
So-
everything else, the
Yeah.
package store, the Flat Penny or whatever it's called now,
Oh, I see it. There it is. Yeah.
the realty
Right.
office, all those
Yeah,
are
you're
in. And Rue's Garage is protected.
Yeah.
The full extent of Caldwell's isn't in a commercial zone.
Oh, yeah.
The front part is.
The front part is, but the full extent isn't necessarily. Ben's is, you know, the old supermarket is, Wheeler's Garage is. The gas station in East Berlin, the mobile isn't. That's in residential agricultural. Thank you very much.
Huh.
Wait, what supermarket?
There was a supermarket for a while on Carter Street behind Ben's Gas.
Oh,
But that's what, they run a fire, they got
Protection.
mhm.
fire protection equipment out of there now, yeah. And then in South Berlin, village powers in the commercial village zone. The post office is the irrigation guy on Bonazzoli's pieces in the commercial village zone. So that we've caught most of them. You know, when we did the zoning the last time in the 90s there, we tried to encompass and protect most of the ones that were viable.
So the ones that you would be outstanding would be ones that are somewhat isolated and perhaps well within a residential agricultural zone around them, which I would say probably should revert back to residential agricultural.
What's going on with Wilson's? The dog place?
As
That looks
far
like
as,
Special permit.
A veterinary use is allowed in the residential agricultural zone.
It is, oh,
Yeah,
As opposed to a doggy daycare.
it's a subsidiary of a veterinary operation.
You're a hot ticket, Tim.
It's ancillary, isn't it? Ancillary.
It depends what percentage of the business it is.
yeah,
Is that in square footage or gross sales?
I don't know. You folks define things, right?
I think it's weight, Tim.
It's, wait, how many pounds of dog poo?
Yeah.
Well, of course, they tried to put in a doggy spa or a doggy whatever, and the building inspector struck them down and said they needed a special permit for it.
What, that was gonna go upstairs or something?
Oh, please.
Are they upstairs?
Oh,
I don't know.
It's all
I
first
don't think
floor.
they can be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I wouldn't think they would have been able to, but
Structurally, I don't think it would hold them,
the pool tables were up there, weren't they?
but who said they were legal?
And not I. Well, shall we play with it that way then? I think that is some merit.
I see it as an improvement. Play with it.
Sure. What's next, Jay?
wait, so what did we just decide? We're gonna delete 1120?
You're taking notes.
We're gonna take 1120 and make it non-conforming uses in a non-residential agricultural zone.
Right.
Is what I heard
Okay.
you saying. Change the title of 1120.
Okay,
Is that non-conforming?
Right. So everything that 1120 says only applies if you're outside of a residential agricultural.
Right.
and in a residential agricultural, we're just not talking about non-conforming uses.
Your SOL.
Chocolate cake.
Well, shouldn't it say not allowed or something, rather than not address it?
Probably.
Make it C, this does not apply to residential agricultural
Yeah,
zones.
Well, or it should say non-conforming uses are not allowed, or whatever, not.
But
cannot
you
be.
want to allow them in all other districts.
Yeah,
so you want to make it an 1125 that addresses the residential agricultural zone?
I think so, because I think there's going to be a pretty big impact from this that needs to be clear.
But I still would change the title of 1120 to non-conforming uses in a non-residential agricultural zone.
I
Yeah,
got that,
and we do that the same in 1130, right?
right.
No,
Yeah,
Yes,
you
That's
wanted
what
to
I
say
said.
non-residential there too, right?
Yes.
So if someone currently has a business in a residential agricultural zone, they can't add on to their structure.
It's defined in 1140.
Right.
Right.
Well,
And
what
we
if-
add
what
a
if-
new 1125 or something that says, in the case of of agriculture residential zone, non-conforming uses that are discontinued can't be, well, non-conforming uses can't be changed or expanded, right?
Ended, maybe.
Yeah,
We need to define, yep.
I think you want to go with the use cannot be changed, because you don't necessarily want to
That's what
say
I-
the
yeah.
structure can't be changed.
Well, this is,
Right.
the title is uses, and 1130 and 40 our title is structures.
right.
But 1120 currently is taken as applying to residential agricultural.
No, I took that out, and now it says in a non-RA zone. And 1125 says in an RA zone,
Okay,
but they're both non-conforming uses. And then
Yep.
when we move on to 1130, we got non-conforming structures, which is non-RA zone. That's a change that we've made.
Yep.
We need to decide whether extend or extension is in or out. Since we aren't quite sure what it means.
The ZBA has a lot of problem with extend, right?
yes. The thing is, under 1141 allowed changes. This authorizes some verbiage at the end needs to be straightened out, because it doesn't make sense, but allows the building inspector in a residential agricultural zone to extend a building. And I guess the feeling I got from you folks and from us was extend is to increase the footprint of the building, as opposed to reconstruct, alter, or structurally change, which should be with the building inspector. If they're going to increase the size of it, my understanding was you wanted them to have a hearing so the neighbors had a chance to voice their opinion. And if you do, then 1141 to me means that the building inspector could give them permission to increase the size of the building.
Yeah, and when he was here the last meeting, he was talking about the difference between the footprint and the bulk.
Right.
What if you substituted the word expansion for extension?
It would mean the same thing.
Well, I thought you were having trouble with the definition of extension.
No, we're having difficulty in 1141, which gives discretion to the building commissioner. In other words, if there's a fire, if they want to alter the building, or if they want to make structural changes, yes, that's in the purview of the building commissioner. The word extended and subsequently extension means that they could enlarge the footprint without any hearing or anything, just at the discretion of the building inspector.
So we just want to remove those two words.
Extended and extension from 1141. And that would require them to come for a special permit.
And this only applies to residential.
No. Yes, 1141 does.
Okay,
So you wanted to say non-conforming single and two-family residential structures may be reconstructed or structurally changed upon a determination by the zoning enforcement officer that such proposed reconstruction or change does not include non-conforming nature of the said structure and the issuance of a building permit where applicable. And
Bingo.
so
So does that mean you need to revise 1142 to separate out extension from the rest of it? Because 1142 pretty much repeats that. That says, in the event that the officer determines the non-conforming nature of such structure would be increased by the proposed reconstruction, extension, alteration, or change, the Board of Appeals may, by special permit, allow such, blah, blah, blah. So now that the first part isn't going to say extension, do we need to add an additional sentence at the end of that saying that any extension to the non-conforming use must be approved by special permit?
To me, this basically says if the building inspector says no to you, flat no, that you can appeal to the ZBA. And that would be for anything, an alteration, structural change, whatever. We gotta hold on to Carolyn. We gotta feed her
and
coffee.
I'm losing it quickly over here.
I mean, you've only been doing this for 4 hours. I mean,
I know, right?
not
It is
yet,
way
no.
past my bedtime.
you see what I'm saying, Tim?
Yep,
You look intense.
no, I think 1142 has to keep that language in it because that's where you get relief.
Exactly, from whatever determination is made by the building inspector.
Yep,
Yeah, I just didn't know if you needed to make a separate sentence to address the extensions.
In the allowed changes in 1141. So something like any.
Actually, you could just remove extend or extension in there, because this is saying you can appeal a decision made by the building inspector in 1141. The non-conforming structures would come under 1130. If you want to increase the size.
Right.
I think you need to play with it, and I before everybody falls asleep, maybe give it a little more time.
yeah. I think we've made progress, big time.
Jay, did we get at least halfway through the list?
No,
Yeah, well, yeah.
you're up to number
We're on question 3, are we?
Yeah.
Well,
4.
I don't know. I think we need to go through it again because these things all interact with one another and overlap and
Oh, yeah,
maybe gaps and whatever. And I think you also got to think carefully about the implications because, you know, right or wrong, somebody spent $800,000 for Mo's, and they're going to be on our doorstep wanting to do something with it, right? So if it turns out all I can do is put a house sitting, you know, 20 feet off Route 62,
they can't even do that.
why?
There's a CR on the, I mean, they can leave the house
Well-
that's there, but
Well, there's a house and a barn there, right? And that's, if that is 2 lots, then they got 2 houses, but
I don't
That's
think you'll
one
even
lot.
find it. Yeah, I think you're gonna find it's one lot that,
80,000 square feet.
yeah,
yeah, so there's somebody who's bought a $150,000 lot for 800,000. So they will, I mean, whatever we do, we can do, but then they're going to be on top of
They
this.
lost.
If somebody spends $800,000 for a house, I hope they have a lawyer and a title search.
Right.
Yeah, especially for that
Indeed.
one. Well, I
Yeah,
think,
well, that's why I was laughing more than anything, yes.
yeah, can you imagine there's probably quite a few liens on that, huh? Yeah. But anyways, are there other situations like that in town that we just have to be mindful of because it may have a huge impact on some of the owners?
Do you mean what ones have conservation restriction?
No, what businesses are being operated in RA?
But that's a business
Oh.
that's a resident, I mean, it's a agricultural use, a sale of agricultural products in a residential agricultural zone that's
Yeah,
provided for in the bylaw, and it happens to be on a parcel of land that has a significant conservation restriction on it. If you bought that property and didn't find out that there was a CR on it, I don't see how you could possibly do that.
yeah, that's a
Right.
good point.
Right,
It's
and
gotta be
shame
with
on
a
you.
deed.
And if you did, you're a jerk, you
Yeah.
know.
And these people have donut shops and they have a construction company. I mean, this is not, John Q. Citizen moving from Boston thinking he's buying a lot of land.
I mean, they may very well think that they're gonna come to the town and ask to have it rezoned, and,
Right.
they could certainly make
Ask.
an argument, and they could go to town meeting with a citizen's petition, or they could convince us that it made sense and we'd support it, there's a lot of avenues, but
Yeah.
so, I mean, they might very well be looking at it as an investment, as an opportunity.
Yeah,
but-
or they might be opening a Davidian style vegetable stand,
Right,
Yeah,
raise the house and put up a big farm stand. That would certainly be allowable and
as long as they're supplying the farm stand with the majority of product from within the town, which
correct. Right,
the investment. to
that's gonna
create
be a little
farm stand-
challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be able to pull it off because
Right.
you couldn't sell enough product out of that from other places in town.
Yeah.
Well,
the fact that there was, the fact that there were all sorts of other things
lots
going.
down at the common garden
There
down
you
by
go.
Solomon Pond.
The fact that Mo was selling cars, trailers, whatever,
Chicken
doing all sorts of
coops.
non-agricultural stuff doesn't matter because that was not conforming with the allowed use, right?
Right.
Agriculture has a stipulation that you're allowed to have ancillary, I don't know how to say, jobs, projects, whatever, to help keep the farm going. So if you repaired tractors or if you were a welder and that was just on the side to help income in order to keep the farm going, you were allowed to do that.
In the Berlin bylaw?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, huh.
But
mean,
it's
in
either
the-
that or is it in the conservation restriction or is it in the bylaw?
I've never seen it.
It's not in our bylaw, but
Maybe it's in the conservation restriction.
in some of the CRs.
Not
Yeah.
in mine.
Tom Eloise has her hand up again.
When I've gone to some town clerk trainings, the state has been there and they just say promote agriculture. And the rest is just petty anti to them. So if you get something from Leominster and you're selling, peaches or apples or they felt as long as it was made in state of Massachusetts, promoting agriculture,
Hmm.
that's what they wanted.
Right.
Thank you.
Nice job. So if you got a list, send it to us, Jay. Did you send it to us?
No, what I did was I made kind of a draft of the minutes with all these things in it, so I could just mark it up as we go.
But yeah, send it to us, and
So-
then if there's something glaring that we've really overlooked, we can try to capture it and
Well,
address it next time.
I'll break it up into what we decided and what we need to decide next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could we impose upon you, Jay, to send it to us too?
Well, we're the planning board, so it's $40 for any documents per copy.
Fair enough. To whom do I make the check? You personally?
Clerk.
Yeah, the clerk.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, my offspring have indicated that they ran my lake house out of oil, and they're not going to go get any more until tomorrow morning, because they also have a driveway.
What's the temperature tonight up there?
27.
Oh, you're fine.
Well, there's one bedroom that freezes up really fast.
Tell them to do a lot of running around in there.
Takes days to thaw out.
Bring
Yeah,
in
that's
one
a
of those
problem.
snowmobiles.
When it's usually empty all winter, we go up there, weekends here and there, and then somebody moves in for the whole week and turns the heat up to 85. Oh, well.
All of a sudden, there's no oil.
Where are you, Jay?
We're on Lake Winnipesaukee.
Ah. Just leave the water running.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's the heat that's the issue.
Yeah.
But I suppose that'll be going around in a circle. It'll be all right, I guess. If it were 0, it'd be a different problem. Lots of
right.
problems.
All
Do you
right.
want a
I
All right, good night, you guys.
Entertain a motion
I'll
to,
move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
This is going to be a problem because I've got already in here adjournment, and I usually don't have to change it by a minute or two because it's 9:38, 9:40, 9:42.
all
Gonna
right,
have to type all 4 digits.
That's
When I
right.
was young, the planning board used to meet in the town hall, the old town hall in the selectman's office. And inevitably it would be, God, I don't know why, just 10:30, 11, 11:30. Well, that was back in the mall days though. I mean, we were putting the mall language together with Cape, yeah, so it was
we
just,
had some, when we were doing up on Highland Commons here, we had some late night,
yep.
11:30, 11:45 nights.
Yeah. So this, hour and a half stuff, you've been spoiled, Jay.
All right. So we have a
Okay.
motion and a second to close it. So I'll take a vote, please. Jay Teach,
Hi.
Timothy Wheeler,
Aye.
Carolyn McDonald,
Aye.
and Tom Sanford, aye. We have closed our meeting.